This is a video I've been wanting to make for a very long time. During the summer of 2021, right in the middle of quarantine, I needed a new way to pass the endless time I had, a new big game to play. I saw one of my friends was spending a lot of time playing Dragon Quest XI, and so I decided to try it for myself. That ended up being one of the best decisions I made that year. I immediately fell in love with the game. I knew I wanted to talk about it in a video, but not just any old video, oh no. This game left a mark on me, and so I wanted to leave my mark on the game. So I decided I would do a full review, analysis, breakdown, whatever you want to call this, on my new favorite 100+ hour game. In this video, I'm aiming to talk about basically everything I can about this game. I'm going to go through the story, give my thoughts on each and every segment, and ranking them as I go along, while stopping to talk about anything else I want to. Characters, how they work, certain gameplay elements I like or don't like, specific spells and abilities worth pointing out, just anything that I think deserves a mention. And there's a lot that falls in that category. I don't even care that I'm not the first to use almost in parentheses in Dragon Quest XI review. I'd say I've earned the right to take that. Also, those should be obvious, major spoilers ahead. With that said though, this is not gonna be one of those quote-unquote reviews that's just a Wikipedia summary of the plot. While, yes, I will be following the story and talking about it at length, I aim to look a bit deeper than the surface level. What works here? What doesn't? Why is this in the game? What's the meaning of it all? This is by far going to be the longest and most ambitious video, but I really do want to give this game the review it deserves, however long it takes. So, with no further ado, I present why Dragon Quest XI-S Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition is almost my favorite game ever. The game starts as most do, with you needing to create a save file. Yes, I'm even talking about goddamn save files. I'm leaving no stone unturned here. In this run, I decided to name myself 11, because I'm pretty sure that's the closest thing there's to the canon name for the hero. The reason I'm talking about this section is because, amid all the typical options when making a save file, Dragon Quest XI has these things called draconic rules. These are various options to make your game that much more difficult. They range from actually making the game more balanced to complete hell. I've never actually played using any of them, but I'd highly recommend turning on strong enemies when you play the game. The game does get a touch easy without it, and you can turn it off at any save point. However, I'm pointing this out now because you can't ever turn them on after this screen. This decision kind of baffles me. You always have the option to turn these rules off, but not on. Why? Beats me. Anyways, after choosing those, or not, you get a bunch of other options not worth noting. Camera controls, brightness, and the choice between 2D and 3D mode, which is something I will touch on later. And then, the game can really begin. Dragon Quest XI opens the same way every JRPG since 1997 has, with a grand pre-rendered cutscene. It starts with us following a small creature through a joyful town. Everybody is celebrating the beautiful day by playing, dancing, or just having a good time. The weather then turns for the worse, and all the town's residents hurry for cover, while the camera pans up to a castle, where you see a bunch of old guys talking about the one, who ends up being a baby with a mark on his hand. And then cuts to the child's mother talking to the baby, looking out the window, while the same creature stares at him through the window. Then the scene flashes forward a bit and everything is aflame. The child's family try to get him out while being pursued by some headless horsemen, but ultimately fail, sending the baby careening into a nearby river, where he gets whisked away in an instant. The weather clears up, and the young one is rescued by a happy old guy, who embraces him and swears to protect the marked child, as we pan up to the world tree in the sky and flash forward. The story really begins with the child, you, now grown up, standing atop a tree, gazing at the greatest tree of all off in the distance. A young lass named Gemma, 11's childhood friend, then arrives to fill you in on what's going on. Long story short, her and you have just turned of age, and as a tradition in your town, Cobblestone, you have to climb this massive rock structure known as the Cobblestone Tor. She beckons you to follow her there, and then we are given our first taste of actual gameplay. The base of the tour exists as a playground to try out all the controls in the overworld. You learn how to run, jump, talk to people, and change the camera speed, because the default speed is agonizingly slow. Once you've got everything figured out, you can head on over to the tour and prepare your ascent. Gemma gives you a bit of information about Cobblestone, explaining a bit of the background of the tour, and reciting a prayer before you set out. But then, something terrible happens. You and Gemma get attacked by slimes! Egats! This battle serves as the introduction to combat, which is something I'll get to later. And believe it or not, the first battle against the weakest enemies is pretty dang easy. The Cobblestone Tour is a mini dungeon that introduces you to all the situational movement mechanics in the game, like climbing across ropes and scaling up ledges. You'll familiarize yourself with enemies, learn how to cast spells, and get a feel for how full dungeons later down the line will be laid out. Eventually, you'll come across one of the younger residents of Cobblestone, who's being attacked by the most vicious of creatures. Clouds. These two serve as the first mini-bosses, and still aren't difficult. The kid, whose forehead I remember more than his name, thanks to Duo for the weather update and heads back down. The rest of the journey is more of the same, until you and Gemma make it up to the top. It's unfortunately cloudy, so you can't see the much anticipated view. But you get on with the prayer anyways, or rather, try to, because a massive bird creature swoops down and drags Gemma to the edge of the cliff. The hero desperately tries to simultaneously save her and fight the bird, but it's a lost cause. It'd take a miracle for the two of them to get out of there alive. But, luckily, miracles are what the Luminary does best. 11's birthmark lights up, creating an identical sigil in the sky as a magical blast of lightning shoots from it and fries the bird on the spot. After trying to come to terms with what just happened, the duo finish the prayer, and the clouds finally part so you can see the view. I'm almost 100% sure that the devs only made you climb up this place as your first trial to show off the graphics of the game. And you know what? I wouldn't start it any other way. The view is simply gorgeous. The sprawling lands, the endless ocean, and a bright red star hovering in the sky. First hour of the game, and I've already got some top tier wallpaper material. Thankfully, you don't have to walk all the way down the tour, thanks to the awesome power of quick traveling. At the bottom, all the villagers are celebrating our achievement of becoming real Cobblestonians. There's a bit more dialogue about how cool you guys are, and then you're free to explore town. Cobblestone lives up to its name, being a very humble little village. There are many houses, and all of them are just made of simple materials, like stone and hay. This gives the town a very comfy feel. It feels like it'd be a great place to grow up. Layout-wise, the town serves as, believe it or not, a tutorial. It's built in a way that encourages a lot of roof scaling by jumping on boxes, and has a couple ladders you can climb to get some loot. Oh, and of course, in classic JRPG fashion, you can break into houses to steal people's stuff, and they don't bat an eye. Awesome. Once you're done exploring the town, you stop by your mom's house to progress the story. She decides it's finally time to explain who you are and why lightning burst from the sky earlier. Long story short, you are the reincarnation of the Luminary, a legendary hero who vanquished the Dark One long, long ago. She says that your late grandfather told you to go to the Grand Kingdom of Heliodor to talk to the king, and all would be revealed by him. So, 11 decides to do just that, and plans to leave the next morning. After a failed attempt at sleeping, the hero awakens to wander outdoors, where he spies Gemma waiting by a tree. Gemma is clearly devastated to see her best friend go. She recalls a good memory of the time she got her scarf stuck in the tree you're standing by, with a weird root around it, and how you helped her get it down. She looks a bit further up at the lone red star in the sky, and recounts the story her granddad told her ages ago.
Once upon a time, long, long ago, the world was terrorized by a horrible monster. But then, the Luminary appeared and saved the day. When it was all over, the Luminary turned into a star, and he's been watching over us from up in the heavens ever since.
A nice simple fairy tale, but keep it in the back of your mind. It'll come up much later. Gemma talks for as long as she can about the whole situation, but her emotions eventually get the better of her and she runs off crying. With nothing else to do, the Luminary returns to bed for his last slumber in Cobblestone. The morning of the departure starts with Hero donning all new, much more iconic clothes. Now they're gonna venture out, you can stop by the shop to pick up some new clothes or armor, but I would highly recommend saving your gold for a bit. The things in the shop are improvements, sure, but you get much better ones soon down the line, and starting weapons should hold until then. When you're done taking the sights of town, you head to the exit to say farewell. You get all the standard goodbyes from the town, and then make arrangements to give Cobblestone a good word with the king, because the place could use a bit more recognition. You're gifted a few things before you set out. A horse for fast travel across the plains of the continent of Yggdrasil, and a map of said continent. Finally, Gemma returns to give you a charm she made. It functions as a starting accessory to introduce you to the system, but it's a really nice memory of your friendship. And with that, the Luminary ventures forth on the first of his many quests. Cobblestone is a pretty good tutorial segment. I've seen some better ones in my day, sure, but I've also seen far worse. It gives you plenty of opportunity to get used to all the basic mechanics, while establishing the general tone of the game not taking all too long. Not to mention, it sets up a strangely good amount of story beats that come into play later. A solid opening, and a pretty good way to start the ranking of scenes. As we venture into Greater Yggdrasil, we're greeted by all sorts of new things to take in and try out. A new method of travel, new enemies to fight, new sights to see, all that good stuff. However, one of these stands above everything else to me. As we leave Cobblestone and go forth into the sprawling field of Erdrea, we are greeted by this song. I legitimately believe that this single song is one of the reasons I like this game so much. The piece is titled "The Hero Goes Forth with a Determination," and it is called out for a damn good reason. The song is somehow always able to motivate me to keep going in the game, whether it be a trek from one area to another, a brief break in between slaying enemies, or anything else. The song gives me the determination to go one step further. Despite playing literally everywhere that isn't a town or some other special destination, it simply never gets old. The instrumentation is great, with the trumpet performing the main melody, while taking breaks for the backing violin and trombone have their moments, so the song never feels repetitive. And of course, the constant, oh so satisfying snare beat in the background. But my personal favorite part is in the first few seconds of it. The song starts with a blast from the trumpet, and then goes into a loud version of the constant snare beat, until some more percussion comes in and really kicks off the song. The piece is meant to fill the listener with determination, and that part just sends excess amounts of it coursing through my veins, while the rest of the tune just keeps it coming. This is far from the last time I mentioned this soundtrack, but I won't go as in-depth in any future talk of it. The game is a stellar OST. There isn't really a bad piece in the bunch, but nothing in there tops this track. It is one of the closest things to musical perfection I've ever heard. The trek over to Heliodor is a rather simple one, but serves its purpose. It's meant to ramp up the enemy difficulty and introduce you to a lot of new foes to face. There are a couple of important things to learn here. Firstly, you'll be introduced to campfires, which serve as little checkpoints where you can regain your health and save. And secondly, you'll learn, one way or another, that you need to move items into your character's inventory for them to use it, since you can't just pull it from the general item stash. This is especially important for medicinal herbs, cause unless you've already learned heal, they're gonna be your only source of healing, and without them, well, you're in trouble. As you progress through the fields and cliffs of central Erdrea, the grand kingdom of Heliodor will start to creep into vision, and once you've satisfied your monster-slaying bloodthirst, you can head on in and see what the greatest kingdom on the continent has to offer. Heliodor is every bit as marvelous as it was set up to be. It absolutely dwarfs the small rural town Hero grew up in, with towering buildings, bustling streets, and of course, the massive castle in the middle of town. There's also a lot more to do here than in Cobblestone. The shops are equipped with better weapons and armor, which I would recommend getting, they'll last you a while. The first bank is here, as well as the first inn. I never used the bank, as I never found any reason not having money directly on me, but the inn is awesome. It's so insanely cheap that anyone could stay there. Well, almost anyone. There are a couple of side quests that give you a chance to explore town. One is you climbing up a building to rescue a cat, and the other one provides a bit of background about two of Heliodor's most important people, Sir Henrik and Sir Jasper, the king's right and left-hand men, respectively. As the brawn and the brains behind Heliodor's army, they are a deadly duo you would not want to go up against, especially together. Once you're done exploring the sparring town, you head up to the castle to progress the story. After a minor setback with some guards, you'll be permitted within, and this place, ho. If you thought the town of Heliodor was fancy, you ain't seen nothing yet. The castle is magnificent. Huge columns, fancy music, massive golden statues, beautiful rugs. It's a castle fit for a king. There's a little garden outside, some rooms upstairs where you can learn a bit of Erdrean history, and a third floor hallway containing a chandelier with a sparkly item on it. You can't get it, the castle staff can't get it, and you'll just have to ignore it for now. But remember this, it'll come back later. Finally, there's a balcony on the outskirts of the third floor. You can get a great view of the kingdom, and more importantly, some more background on the Red Star, called Erdwin's Lantern. When you've seen all the castle has to offer, you can go through the giant double doors to see the king, and what a reception you get. You're greeted with rows of knights, and even Sir Henrik and Sir Jasper are there. King Carnelian greets you and rejoices, after confirming that you are the luminary. The king has clearly been looking for this day for a long time, and justifiably so, based on what you've been told yourself. After learning you hail from Cobblestone, he sends Sir Jasper out to reward the town accordingly, and then...
Accursed luminary! I know not what your intent was in coming here alone, but whatever your wicked scheme, know that it shall not succeed!
Hendrik! Take this cur, this harbinger of calamity, and cast him into the furthest corner of the dungeon. Know this, the luminary is the root of all evil and will bring naught but misery to our realm.
This twist is fantastic. Everything in the game thus far set up Heliodor explaining everything. This scene only adds more questions and intrigue to the mystery of the Luminary. Not to mention, all of your time in Heliodor has just established how powerful of a nation it is, and how you do not want them on your bad side. Being the biggest city in the world, having an extensive number of soldiers, and of course, Jasper and Hendrik, everything tells you that you do not want to be against the kingdom, and the Luminary is now the #1 enemy. Hendrik carries Hero off to the depths of the dungeon, while giving him a title you're going to get very familiar with, the Darkspawn. Believe it or not, there isn't very much to do in prison. All your items are gone, so the only thing you can really do is bang on the door and check the menus. This is a good time to talk about titles. Every party member has a title you can see when checking their attributes, which essentially describes who and what they are at that point in the story. But there are a lot of these for every character. They can change after any story event with the character, minor or major, so it's always fun to check up on your character's stats to see if there's anything new. Why I bring this up? Well, we'll get to that in a bit. After making enough ruckus in the cage, the prisoner next to you will start to get annoyed and tell you to quiet down. He and Eleven start having a talk. After Hero mentions that he's a luminary, the prisoner gets really excited. He performs some smooth moves to take out a guard and get out of his cell, and heads over to Eleven to offer him some help. The prisoner, named Erik, makes some weird cryptic comment about a seer and decides to help you escape. He's got a hole he's been digging, and will take you down with him once you're ready. But first, you remember those tiles I was just talking about? Well, I mention now because Luminary's current one is Fugitive Luminary. That's pretty unnotable. But what is notable is the fact that during that about 30-second long segment while you're in jail, he has an entirely different towel seen nowhere else in the game. Yeah, when I said there were a lot of these things, I meant it. Erik will give you your items back, and then take you down his hole with him. He mentions the seer again, and then you two are off through the sewers of Heliodor. The music and uncommon torches lighting the path help set the mood. And also, oh man, this lighting. Ooh. It doesn't take long for some guards to spot the duo, leading to a chase sequence. This part is mind-numbingly easy, with the only slight problems you could have coming from the fact that Hero can't run and this one weird turn. The chase eventually leads into a stealth segment that's only marginally harder. And once you get through that, you'll end up surrounded by guards on a bridge despite your best efforts. The bridge crumbles under the weight of so many people, and Eleven is sent into the waters below. Upon waking up, you find yourself somewhere. Not even the map will tell you anything about this place. There's a statue to save and restore your health, but aside from that, the only thing you can see is a massive gaping cave in front of you. The cave is dark, eerie, and seemingly empty, until you run across something very large lurking in the darkness. That something being a reminder of why this game is called Dragon Quest. Your only real option here is to turn tail and run away from the terrifying beast. I mean, you could stay and fight the dragon, but don't. You're thrust into another chase section to escape the dragon, which isn't much harder than the last one, but is a lot cooler feeling. After narrowly avoiding getting burnt to a crisp, it looks like our heroes are home free, but would you believe it, there's still more soldiers out to get them. Hero and Erik manage to get out of the sewers, but aren't in a particularly better spot. With nowhere left to run, Erik throws back his hood, revealing his face and name, and delivers one of my favorite lines in the game.
Let's do this. I believe in you. I believe in the Luminary. I don't have much choice.
Though you may be getting hunted down by the biggest kingdom in the continent for being the one who will supposedly bring about the end of the world, there are still people who see through that, who know you're more than that. You are the savior of the world. You are the Luminary, and they believe in you. And with that, Hero and Erik jump off the cliff into the waters below, while the game freeze frames and plays its opening cutscene. The opening cutscene plays every time I boot up the game, in addition to this one point in the game. It's entirely pre-rendered and looks absolutely fantastic. The cutscene is simply a collection of scenes across the game redone and reimagined like this. You really feel the scope of your whole adventure across a simple 2-minute cutscene. You get a little bit of a preview for each of your party members, showing off what they do, and a sneak peek at some of those memorable scenes to come. From the treacherous snowy winds of Sniflheim to the thrilling chase Hendrik will give you to the majestic world tree. Everything here is recreated beautifully. And of course, the music. It wouldn't be a Dragon Quest game without a remix of the series overture, and this remix absolutely delivers. Fantastic cutscene overall. Now let's get back to the game. Eleven wakes up in the middle of a church. Somehow he and Erik managed to survive the jump from a cliff, and none took the two of them in and healed them up. The church is almost directly below Heliodor, and isn't far from Cobblestone, but Erik insists on going back up. He supposedly has an item hidden away in downtown Heliodor that he absolutely cannot leave without. He'll help Eleven on his quest to save the world and all, but only after you go back and get it. And with that, Erik joins the party and can now be used in combat. The hill leading up to the city has plenty of small battles where you can try out to get a sense for how he works. I won't cover that yet since I haven't discussed combat, but both of those are coming up soon enough. Once you've had your fun monster slaying, you head up the zigzag wood structure back into the city. Heliodor is much like Seattle. At first glance, it seems like the greatest city in the world, with massive buildings, high-class citizens, and fancy stores. But look where they don't want you to and you'll find the ugly truth of the city. Downtown Heliodor is full of garbage piles, raggedy houses, and construction foundations. The area is also one of the most annoying to navigate in the game. The story here has you running back and forth across this town for absolutely no reason other than wasting your time, and it is utterly obnoxious. The only thing you need to know here is that Erik's red orb he's looking for isn't where he thought it was, so he wants to confront his partner in crime, Dirk, who's now living high class, presumably because he sold it. And rat it out, Erik. Except here it takes about 15 minutes to get that info because of useless ass side quests. Luckily there's one NPC hiding out up here that I only found in this playthrough, who'll dig you a tunnel into the uptown, saving you a bunch of time and sandy. Even after 100 hours, there's still crazy new things to find in this game. Guards are all over the main town of Heliodor, so to get to Dirk's estate, you gotta get a bit crafty with your maneuvering, taking rooftops and tie-ropes to avoid being spotted. All that training from Cobblestone is already paying off. Eventually you'll arrive at one of the massive houses near the castle. Within the house, you'll find a fancy looking shop and a large man leaning over the counter. This is Dirk, and Erik is less than happy to see his old pal again. Luckily, Dirk has a valid reason for everything he's done, and he's happy to tell us after Erik's done shaking him around. Turns out, Dirk actually did about the opposite of what Erik thought he did. Well, yes, he did sell the orb to the king. He didn't do it along with turning in Erik for a massive reward. He in fact did it after Erik got captured, and then used his money and power to indirectly help Erik escape. Which is how Erik was able to dig a massive hole with nobody noticing, and now he's even willing to help point to where the orb currently is. Erik realizes that it was wrong of him to ever doubt his partner in crime, and the two make up fine. I like this scene. It's a nice simple way to show the relationship between Dirk and Erik. It makes me wish Dirk was in the game more, since outside of the scene he basically never shows up. And this scene is small beans compared to some of the grander character moments we'll get later on. Before we set off on our way, Dirk tells us the orb is now being stashed in the Kingsbarrow, which is basically the king's personal treasury. Luckily, it's right next to Cobblestone, so we can just stop there on the way. Unfortunately, we can't go straight to Cobblestone, because Jasper's men are watching the area like hawks. But there's an alternate route that goes through a thick forest known as the Manglegrove. So, the party sets out yet again. While Heliodor doesn't have much in terms of combat, it more than makes up for that with world building and plot. It establishes some villains, shows what we can expect from towns, and introduces us to our first new party member. I'm putting it a tier above Cobblestone for these reasons. Cobblestone is the intro to the game, but Heliodor is the real hook. The road to the Manglegrove isn't too notable. We can explore a bit more of the Heliodor foothills, fight some absolutely adorable enemies, and get some goodies, but that's hardly worth pointing out. A bit of trekking through Heliodor Field will take us to the Manglegrove itself. The grove is a rainforest type biome filled with less than threatening enemies. There isn't too much to find here, save a cabin with a campfire in front of it. Erik makes you rest here, so we can reflect on everything that's happened with Dirk, and, more importantly, so we can give you a very special item they picked up during his thieving days, the fun-size forge. The forge is a tool used to create items, weapons, and armor with instruction books you find throughout the game, and this thing is so much fun to use. The devs could have just made a simple selection where you put the ingredients in and get the thing you want, but they want to do something more, and the result is fantastic. The fun-size forge is a little mini-game where you have to create the item yourself. You do this by bashing squares on it, with more squares meaning more complex items, and try and get each one into a perfect little zone. As you level up and progress through the adventure, you'll get more opportunities to strike at items, and more ways to hit, like being able to hit multiple tiles at once, or having a weaker strike for more precise moments. And the better you make an item, the more stats it'll give, so it's really rewarding. The fun-size forge turns the simple and typically mundane act of crafting an item into a really fun minigame, and is one of my favorite little things about the game. I just can't get enough of this thing. After a night of slumber, the duo is woken to a dog barking at them and beckoning them to follow it. Doing so will lead to a small, odd plant. This is an Yggdrasil root. It has a tiny portion of the power of the World Tree, and can show Yggdrasil's Chosen, or as he's more commonly known, the Luminary, a vision of the past. These things show up multiple times throughout the game, mostly to reveal some backstory to a character or location. This one introduces us to the mechanic. In the flashback it shows, a woodcutter's out on a stroll, only to see that a bridge he rebuilt yesterday is destroyed once again. The cause of this minor trolling, the almighty Tricky Devil. This rapscallion explains how the woodcutter just fell for his late epic prank, and then turns him into a dog and goes to hide in a nearby chest. So yeah, the dog that led the duo over is the woodcutter, and now we gotta go vanquish the Tricky Devil. After a bit of exploration, you'll stumble across the chest, and the devil will jump out and attempt to surprise you. The party isn't amused. Naturally, his second trick is to attempt to deep fry us, and thus starts the first boss fight of the game. And I think now it is finally time to talk about combat. Dragon Quest is a series known for several things. One of the main traits of the series is how it doesn't evolve too much. Aside from minor changes throughout the years, the series has kept to the same basic formula since the 80s. This is clear when comparing the game's stories, music, and above all else, combat. While other series went on to revamp the JRPG formula or entirely reinvent it, Dragon Quest has stayed mostly the same, which holds true for the 11th entry. Dragon Quest XI's combat is the JRPG standard. You select a move to do when it's your turn, and then you do the move. No waiting for meters, no moving things around, no whatever this is. It's clean, simple, and fun. Now, the combat system isn't quite as simple as it was in the 80s. It has a couple of notable things to spice it up. The most impactful of these is how you spend your MP. Obviously, you've got good reliable spells, and a lot of them, but not every character has a huge amount of spells. Hell, one of them doesn't have a single one-turn name. That's where abilities come into play. Abilities are moves that cost MP, but rather than being a magical attack or debuff or whatever, they're moves caused by the characters themselves, or their weapon. Like, Hero summoning thunder from the sky is obviously a spell, but him wildly swinging around his greatsword isn't, so it's an ability. This also includes stuff like Erik's Steel, Sylvando's Party Shield, and Jade's Puff Puff. The division of MP usage across these two is brilliant. It helps some characters stand out more. Some are more spell focused, other abilities, and some in between. There are gameplay benefits for both being good. There are some enemies that will prevent spellcasting and some that prevent abilities, so it's beneficial to know when to use some of each. The next couple things that make the battle system work are a bit harder to describe. Well, actually only one is. The other is the fact that there are no random encounters. Always a plus getting to freely choose your battles, and unlike something like Earthbound, you can easily avoid enemies you don't want to fight, giving you near complete control over what you battle. It's great! Anyways, the other great Mario thing is harder to describe. It's still something I like to call turn ordering, and it's best to explain with an analogy. Imagine a round of combat like a restaurant, with every party member and enemy in a battle being a customer. Once a customer gets their food, their action is performed. For comparison, let's look at Earthbound. In Earthbound, everybody goes to the restaurant and orders at once. Then, probably based on their speed stat, everyone's food is delivered in a set order, but only after they've all placed their orders. This is the way things were for a long while, and it's a system I've never really liked. It's sufficient, sure, but flawed. Like if a party member is low on health, you might have your healer try to heal them. But there's always a chance the enemy will go first and kill them, resulting in the heal still going through, but probably going to someone who doesn't need it. Dragon Quest fixes this in a way that retains the classic formula, makes it much smoother. Imagine the restaurant got big and installed a drive-thru. So now characters will line up in the drive-thru in an order generally based on decks, place their order, and then immediately perform their action. No more awkwardly hoping your heals will heal, no more using big finishers on already dead enemies, no more nothing like that. It's such a simple change but works wonders for making the game's combat flow. Another small and effective improvement is something that's definitely been around for a while, grouping up enemies. Different spells, abilities, and even basic attacks with weapons will target a differing number of enemies. The best example of this is the default fire spell for each of the 3 types of targets. Frizz and its upgrades are big damage spells that deal all the damage on one enemy, making them great for bosses. Bang, Boom, and Kaboom are the classic blow everything up moves. They target all enemies and do roughly equal damage to all of them, and have the potential to end fights in a single turn. Finally, Sizz and its friends serve as the in-between. They'll target a group of enemies and do a good even spread of damage between all of them. If you played Earthbound, it's similar to PSI attacks that will hit a certain row of enemies, except 3-dimensional. As stated, different attacks will hit any one of these 3. It is incredibly useful to learn something that lets your weapon do something it can't normally do. On the Greatsword skill tree, one of the most useful things you can get right off the bat is an ability that lets you hit a group of enemies, which greatly expands heroes' options with the weapons. Oh yes, skill trees. Oh man, where to even begin with these? Every character has multiple weapons they can equip, and a skill tree unique to every character. On that skill tree, they can learn a bunch of upgrades for their weapon, and their character's unique skills. There are far too many specific skills on each tree I want to talk about, so we'll talk about each character's trees for each of their analyses, and any individual skills I feel need to be discussed shall be when I get to them in this playthrough, so consider this just a preview for that. The last thing I gotta talk about with the battle system is the way it looks. Dragon Quest is something truly incredible with the graphics and battles. In most JRPGs, upon entering battle, your party is sent to some weird room for that battle. This is the way it is in games like Final Fantasy, Persona, and Earthbound is, weird. It works, since the room for the fight is thematically fitting with wherever you are at the time you start. But what if you took it one step further? Dragon Quest level will just take wherever you're staying at the time you start the battle and turn it into the arena. Sure, it may shove you a little ways away if the arena is too small, but that's about it for changes. While this is common for games like Xenoblade or Secret of Mana, I've never seen a traditional JRPG such as this, and it is a great change. Combined with the lack of random encounters, it really helps to integrate the battles into the overworld in a way that feels extremely connected. One more unique thing to this game is the ability to freely move your characters around the arena. This is a really weird mechanic. It seems like it could be used to possibly dodge some attacks, but it isn't. As far as I can tell, it's purely visual fun, but it is a lot of visual fun. Getting to see the enemies react to your characters shifting, getting really close to your party to see what quips they have to say about the battle, performing rituals to try to kill metal slimes, it's all great. But those character quips are something else. There are dozens of these per characters, based on what you're fighting, what their health is like, any status effects they have, how the rest of the party is doing. Oh, they're great. And to wrap up the visuals, I of course gotta talk about the look of spells and whatnot. Every spell and ability looks fantastic. They're all colorful, full of energy, and really sell the power of the heavy hitting ones. I mean, just look at some of the last abilities you get. These things are gorgeous. So that just about covers the basics of battling. The system is simple, which is its greatest strength. It doesn't need a dozen tutorials that stretch out the entire game, because it's the same basic mechanics that were in Dragon Quest 20 years ago, just updated for modern times. As I said, I'm going to look closer at specific characters, skills, spells, and the like as they come up. So this is not the last time I'll be talking about battling, but this is the biggest section on it. Probably. Also, we'll cover Pep later. So now that I've set the scene for how battles work, I'd say it's time we look at the first person to join our party.
The seer told me to stick with the luminary when I found him, and that's just what I'm going to do.
Erik is a thief, and just like that you can tell what he plays like. He has the highest deftness and agility out of anyone in the party, with pretty good strength but middling defenses and magic. Erik has access to 3 weapons, swords, which are the most successful weapon, and probably the worst on him. They're not terrible, but there are better guys to run swords, especially since Erik can't equip shields, and Erik has some rarer weapons. He's one of 2 characters that can run daggers, which, as you may expect, are faster and weaker versions of swords. They have their own exclusive abilities and skills, and are very well suited to Erik's stats. They pair well with his crazy speed, being equipped with several things that inflict status effects and have the potential to one-hit KO, so they benefit from him going first. And they have ways to get unbelievably high damage, making up for his somewhat lackluster strength. Finally, Erik is the sole wielder of boomerangs. Boomerangs are weird, in that they're the only weapon that's default attack hits every foe at once. So essentially have the choice of making Erik a guy who can weaken and potentially defeat all enemies at once with boomerangs, or a guy can really weaken and or completely destroy one enemy pretty reliably. I used boomerangs in my first playthrough, and this one daggers. I think I personally prefer daggers. Both are incredible options, but Erik's potential damage output with the skills Purse Cutter and Victimizer is so absurdly dumb that no option could possibly compete. Boomerangs are also fantastic though. Skills like Toomrang, Starburst Throw, and the infamous Double Down can't be ignored. Honestly, any weapon on Erik is great. Save swords. Don't use swords on him. Erik's skill tree, alongside the weapons he gets, has a section for Guile. This is where he learns all of his thieving tricks, and improves his dex and agility. I'll cover skills like Divide and Critical Claim when I get to those, as they absolutely deserve their own sections. But for now, I gotta talk about one very special skill Erik gets right away. Half Inch. Half Inch is a thief's defining skill. It lets him steal from enemies. For the low cost of literally nothing, Erik can use his turn to try to steal from a foe. This move's use cannot be overstated. In late game, there are a lot of really good weapons and armor pieces that can only be crafted with rare materials. Where do you get these materials? Well, they're dropped rarely from a couple enemies. So you could go through the trouble of grinding enemies and hoping they drop, or you could just steal them. Half Inch late game cuts out so much potential grinding, as nearly a necessity for getting those top tier weapons. That said, early game, it's a bit less good. Half Inch works incredibly rarely at the start. The calculation for it working is def divide by 20, so it has about a 1% chance of working when you get him. That said, it is really satisfying to go through the game and gradually see it work more. It really feels like you're making progress. Erik has a really weird spell list. He has the smallest selection of spells, save Jade, who doesn't have a single one, and not all of them are even combat spells. He gets evac pretty early, which returns the party to the start of the dungeon, but Hero also gets it around the same time, and it gets completely outclassed by Zoom. Peep is a spell that will tell you what's inside a chest, in case you're scared of fighting mimics. But mimics are a fun fight and not too hard, so it's really not too useful. He gets a spell which wakes up all party members, which is pretty nice I guess, and then all his last spells are increasingly powerful versions of his exclusive spell, Rubble Rouser. Rubble Rouser is a pretty interesting one. It creates a sigil under the enemy, or group of enemies with its upgrades, which will deal damage to them every time they try to act. It's a great support spell for boss fights, since it's essentially just free damage. You shouldn't rely on it too much, obviously, but it's excellent support for your more damaging party members. Which brings me to one final thing about Erik. I have created an alignment chart for all the party members of the game, based on how they function in combat. As you can see, it ranges from magic to physical, based on whether or not they use spells or abilities for their main role, and damage to support, based on, well, it should be obvious. Erik goes right in the top at physical mixed. While he has Rebel Rouser, he definitely uses abilities more to fill his role. He's got a good source of damage with Purse Cut or Victimizer and Critical Claim, but he definitely leans more towards support, with a selection of abilities like the obvious Half Inch, Sleeper Hit, Double Down, Evac, and Critical Claim again. Overall, Erik is a really good party member who can fit pretty well into either role, with any of his 3, basically 2, weapons. I don't have much to compare him to yet, but I will come back to him when we get more powerful skills. Alright, back to the main quest. Where were we? Oh yeah, the first boss. Yeah, I may be a bit overleveled for him. Luckily, being overleveled is pretty easy to fix. Since there's no random encounters, I can just avoid enemies more than usual until the game's difficulty evens out again. Simple as that. So yeah, we beat the Tricky Devil, the woodcutter turns back to normal, and then he rebuilds the bridge for us. And with that, we're back off to Cobblestone. After a brief trek through the rest of the Manglegrove, the party arrives in a familiar area, the departure from Cobblestone. There doesn't seem to be any sign of anything, save the random slimes, so the party heads back into the small town beyond the hill. Upon returning to Cobblestone, it seems pretty good actually. Everything seems normal. All the buildings are intact, everyone seems happy, so it's safe to assume that Jasper didn't do too much to the place. Might as well ask around. And this is where things start getting odd. People don't seem to recognize 11, or if they do, they talk about him in the third person. Well, maybe Erik has something to say about this. And he's not here either. Something is very wrong. Going into your house doesn't help reassure you. 11's mom freaks out upon seeing him, and says that her son's not a tall young man with a sword and a world-saving quest ahead of them, but rather a wee 6-year-old boy. So now things are really weird. Going outside again will show us Gemma crying by a tree, but she's a bit, shorter than usual. Upon heading over there and helping her get her scarf out of the tree, which is something that 11 has done multiple times for her now, she offers to take us over to her best friend, 11. You don't have much choice in the matter, because going too far away from Cobblestone will bring you face to face with these giant glowing walls that definitely weren't there last time. Following Gemma brings us to an eastern part of town we've never had any reason to explore before, where we find a small graveyard and 2 very interesting people having a conversation. Chalky, 11's deceased grandfather, and a young man with a very distinct haircut. So these 2 are having a conversation as we approach. Or rather, Chalky's monologuing, considering this guy can't speak.
I haven't seen him before.
And what the hell? Ignoring that, Chalky sends the young lad away, so he can have a talk with his grandchild, all grown up in a way he'll never see. After a few brief comments on how well 11's grown up, the 2 discuss basically everything that Hero's been through, with his failed journey to Heliodor. Chalky says that to save Chowder, he's gotta bury some things under a nearby rock, so he can dig it up and have everything explained. And with that, he ends with some advice about living with love, and just vanishes. In fact, everybody's gone now. Or almost everybody. Young 11 and Gemma are still playing by the tree, and the Luminary comes down to thank you for getting Gemma's headscarf, and says you're free to play with him anytime. And with that, the 2 of them return to talking, and the world changes around Hero. The tree was covered in Yggdrasil root, so that was nothing more than a vision of the past, and the present is much less pleasant. Cobblestone can't even be called a town anymore, it's simply a pile of rubble. Heliodor did all of this simply because he happened to grow up in this one poor defenseless town. This is a really damn good scene. It establishes how much of a threat the kingdom of Heliodor truly is, and how merciless they can be. And more importantly, how bad it is they've made them your enemy. But the whole flashback part is a real treat here. The game does an excellent bait and switch on you, tricking you into thinking everything's fine, but the feeling of something being off sets in more as you talk to people. And a talk with Chalky is a nice scene. It shows just how much Chalky cared for his grandkid, making it kind of a shame this is the only scene with him in the whole game. There is, however, one thing with this scene that I hate, and that is this big purple idiot. 11 just had a flashback where we got to see a younger version of himself, didn't get recognized by his own mother, and got to have one last conversation with his late grandfather who cared so deeply for him, only to see it all fade away and be replaced by his hometown in ruins, destroyed by some fiends who thinks he's about to bring an end to the world, just because he grew up here. That is a lot of tragic and heartbreaking things back to back. And how does this guy react? With the same stoic face he always has. Dragon Quest's insistence on having a silent protagonist who can't react to anything hinders this scene so much. It's the perfect opportunity for him to react, show some personality, to do anything. But nothing. because you have to uphold some stupid tradition. The worst part is that this is the exact same scene where you see young Luminary for the first time, when you talk in his thick Scottish accent just fine, which makes it even more insulting that his now scarred older self is completely mute. I hate this part of the scene so much. I already covered it in my video Silent Protagonist, because it really does represent the worst part of that trope. The return to Cobblestone is an amazing scene that is brought down significantly by the Luminary being as stoic as ever at the end of it, but everything until then is phenomenal. It's going in A tier and will stay at the bottom of it. Heading back out of Cobblestone, you take a right through a previously impassable cave and find the rock that Chalky told you about. Within the box Chalky buried, the duo find 2 letters, the first of which is from Hero's mom. His real mom. The letter reveals Eleven's true heritage as the prince of the now destroyed kingdom of Dundrasil. His mom also writes in the letter that when he comes of age, he should visit the king of Heliodor, which explains how Chalky got the idea. So, this is a pretty important bit of background for the hero. A prince of a kingdom, who would have guessed? Well, it's not exactly super hidden. I mean, it's in the first 3 hours of the game, which is still part of the demo. It's far from the first secretly royal Dragon Quest protagonist, and, I mean, it's in the opening cutscene. The letter is more or less just confirmation of what was pretty easy to figure out. The second letter is from the old man himself, Chalky. He talks about how great it was to see his adopted grandkid all grown up, explains how he found young Hero, and includes a big blue gemstone and some instructions on using it. The gemstone opens something called the Door of Departure, which is pretty close to our current location. He includes the letter with the same advice about living with love and not bearing grudges. So, Hero and Erik decide that the Door of Departure is the next stop. After getting the orb back, of course. Luckily, the Kingsbarrow is on the way, and it's nothing more than a minor detour to get there. Speaking of detours, there's a big open area to explore on the way to the Kingsbarrow called the Emerald Coast. It's a massive field that turns into a shoreline, and is one of the best looking areas of the game thus far. But aside from admiring the new enemy designs, there isn't actually anything to do here. But regardless, it'd feel wrong to not at least mention an area this pretty. The Kingsbarrow is a massive mine-looking temple with a cool top. Upon going inside, you'll find that all the guards are dead, which saves you a bit of work, but also means you probably have some bigger problems to deal with. The Kingsbarrow serves as the first dungeon in the game, and does a really nice job of being one. The dungeon is filled with enemies, both old and new. They're fun to fight, and introduces you to foes you'll start to see frequently, like monsters with healing spells, mechanical enemies, which tend to be tankier but with lower HP to compensate, and devils. I always found it weird how the first boss is a devil type enemy. At the end of the dungeon, not even an hour later, you're fighting basically the same guy as a regular enemy. Like, sure, they're not exactly the same, but it still feels like there should be a bit more time between these two things. The dungeon has a pretty simple layout, but introduces some themes you'll see in every coming dungeon. It's a mostly linear path with some detours to get loot. It's really short compared to the later ones, which does make sense, but it's a smooth intro to the mechanics, which I guess we're actually showing the Cobblestone tour, but whatever. The dungeon also introduces the player to one of the most important mechanics you'll see later on, monster mounts. Every now and then, you'll find a monster with some extra shiny particle effects around it. If you kill it in battle, you'll be able to ride the monster around. These are a very odd addition to the game, but I quite like them. Every mount controls entirely differently, and has its own puzzles built around the new mobility that it provides, or just makes overall traversal easier. There are some later dungeons where a mount will be necessary for traversal, but the mechanic never feels like it's getting in the way of anything, since dungeons are always built around them in a really fun way. Monster mounts are a fun way of expanding your moveset temporarily, and rewarding you for using your new moveset in creative ways to explore the environment. I think it would be just fine without them, but they're another small thing that really adds a lot. So, after traversing the Kingsbarrow and looting all the chests, our heroes make their way to the bottom, where the orb is being held. Unfortunately, they aren't the only ones looking for it. A couple of griffins are already there, and are planning to take it and give it to their master. Obviously, Erik isn't too happy about this, so we gotta sell things the only way we know how, beating the crap out of each other until one team falls. Let's go. I may be a bit underleveled for this fight. Alright, let's do this again, shall we? I got a few more levels and I have a new trick up my sleeve. You see, along with abilities, some characters can get spells from the skill trees, and because these spells are hard to get, they tend to be really good. And that's the case with Hero's new spell and my single favorite spell in the game, Zap. Zap is a very simple move. It targets a group of enemies with lightning magic, and that's it. But much like its appearance in Smash Bros, while it is simple, it is undoubtedly one of Hero's best and most versatile moves. 11 already has a spell that targets a group of enemies, Sizz, but Zap just blows Sizz out of the water. Why is that? Well, because Zap is absurdly strong for basically no reason. It does so much more damage than Sizz, and while it does cost a bit more, that 8 MP cost becomes really small, really fast. But the best part about Zap is that it seems to scale better than any other spell. I was consistently using Zap for about the first third of this 100-hour game. And while other spells had to get updated versions to make themselves viable, like Sizz, Zap just never fell off. And by the time when it finally does start to falter, you're blessed with Zapple, which is just more of the same. Zap is such a fantastic spell for being learnable so early on, and just like its appearance in Smash, it is absolutely one of my favorite parts of Heroes Kit. With the amazing newfound lightning spell in hand, the Griffins go down without much issue. Erik takes his orb and makes another comment about how lucky he is to have found 11. Yeah, and Git's good tell he kinda does that a lot. He also makes another ambiguous statement about what he needs the orb for, which he also does a lot. Anyways, now that we've completed the dungeon, now is a good time to use the incredible evac spell. Oh yeah! Well, that was fun. So, with the orb in hand, the party set off towards the door of departure, which you can actually see from the Emerald Coast. When you're done fighting the foes on the coast, it's a quick skip and a hop over to the door. Or at least it should be. Unfortunately, all the time spent in the dungeon has given Hendrik and his men more than enough time to catch up to us. This leads to a cutscene featuring a high-intensity horse chase. Being a cutscene, you don't get to play through this chase at all, sadly. Well, it's a dang good cutscene. One thing it does really well is show that Hendrik is not someone you want to mess with. His cavalry is fast, and if it weren't for various strokes of luck, the duo surely would have been captured by him. He's also a crazy good shot with a crossbow, being able to hit a moving target while moving himself. Luckily for our heroes, the gemstone opens the door and lets them through before closing fast enough to seal Hendrik out, so he's off our tails. For now. The door takes the duo down to an area completely unlike the one we were just in. Opening the map reveals we're now in the furthest southeast point in the world. There is actually a really good reason why the door takes us to this one spot, but I'll cover that later. The area around us is made of a darker rock, and there's a volcano off in the distance. There's also a couple of enemies hanging around, but they don't pose much of a threat. The main attraction in the area is the easily recognizable path that goes leading to a nearby town, Hotto. Compared to Cobblestone, Heliodor, and actually every other town you'll encounter later in the game, Hotto is weird. Every town in the game is based on a real-life nation, and sometimes a certain town within. Hotto is the representation of Japan. It has its own unique music, which slaps by the way, and everyone speaks in haikus. Ugh, gross poetry. Naturally, the duo is introduced to the town in the best way possible. Advertising. This one chap talks about how incredible the saunas in town are, and even gives us a free pass. Erik wants to get back on the road as fast as possible, but after a comment about how he smells, his mind changes pretty fast. Hotto is a weirdly laid out town. It's built as a two-way fork with a plane at the bottom. The path to the left goes absolutely nowhere of use, but the right path goes up to the shop into Hot Springs, but you have to go up, around, and over the bar to get there, where it feels like there really should just be a staircase. There is a reason for that, but it's still weird and makes it really confusing to navigate. They force you to pass by the bar so you can see a cutscene where you first arrive, and hey, that's what's going on now. Hero's just out minding his business when he sees a young girl get thrown out of the inn. The lass is clearly foreign, since she doesn't speak in stupid haikus like everyone else. She's having an argument with someone within the bar, but quickly turns her attention to our purple protagonist. She asks for her name, and sadly you're forced to tell her. She wants to talk some more, but needs help finding her little sister, and so she takes off, but not before making a strangely ambiguous comment about Hero. How odd. Up at the sauna, we gotta change into more fitting attire to enter, of course. This is sadly not an outfit you can have Hero equipped throughout the entire journey. Erik's waiting for us, and tells us how we can encounter the same little red girl. He's then interrupted by a girl crying. She's talking about how she lost to someone. She never actually says who she's looking for though, so naturally, these two boneheads assume it must be the red girl's sister. So, without even bothering to ask her a simple question, they set off to find the young lass again. But, now for a bit of sidetracking. Going around the back of the sauna, you'll find a bunny girl, who bestows upon you the greatest gift you can come across. A puff puff. Now, it's never actually said what a puff puff is, because, well, T rating. But it's pretty obvious what's implied. This is far from the only puff puff you can get in your journey. In fact, you can earn an achievement for going around the world and getting every kind of puff puff there is, so keep that belt loosened. Speaking of morally ambiguous achievements, there's another one you can earn for going back to the ladies' room of the sauna, much to the dismay of the staff. And of course, it's called Where No Man Has Gone Before. Cute. Heading back down the entrance will show us that the young girl has gotten herself into another argument. It's worth pointing out that what she lacks in size, she more than makes up for in sass. Even in her around 2 minutes of screen time, she's throwing more insults than the current party combined. Though I guess that's only one person. And that'll only become more prominent as she becomes a major player. Anyways, surprise surprise, the girl from the sauna, named Connie, isn't the girl's sister and says looking for her dad. Wow, if only these two tried, I don't know, asking her who she was looking for instead of jumping to idiotic conclusions. Exactly, thank you Veronica. Alright, the red girl introduces herself as Veronica and decides to help us find Connie's dad. We go back to the bar and yada yada, some pretty unnotable stuff happens. Long story short, Veronica learns her sister, Serena, went to find her first, and then left right as Veronica was coming to look for her and wandered off somewhere. So the duo, along with Veronica, venture off west to locate her missing sister, and hopefully Connie's dad in the process. After a short travel, we arrive at the second dungeon of the game, the Cryptic Crypt. A good thing too, I'm getting tired of talking about plot all the time. The dungeon has an almost identical look to the Kingsbarrow. Stone walls, closed-in spaces, spooky enemies. It doesn't really do much to differentiate itself. There are some pretty fun things here though, like these lump wizards, which I am convinced have the best entrance animation of any enemy in the game, between their weird jump and light cackle. The dungeon's main gimmick is the floor. There are certain parts of the floor that are unstable, but look the same as all the rest of it, so you gotta figure out which ones are real and fake through puzzles, logic, and good old process of elimination. It's not the end of the world if you fall though. You get sent to a room with a bunch of monsters and a ladder. 'Tis nothing but a small time waster. You can even find a new monster mount down here to make traversing the dungeon that much easier. This one's much better than the egg bot from the last dungeon. The crypt does have one thing I really don't like though. That is the Yggdrasil route. Up until this point, and every instance I can remember after this point, Yggdrasil routes are scarce, and all used to show the past for a moment of storytelling, character development, or revealing something from a long time ago. But then there's this single stupid route here, which just shows a random enemy taking a path through the dungeon, so the player knows which way doesn't lead to trap. It's such a moronic thing to have. It feels almost disrespectful to the other Yggdrasil routes, especially after the one in Cobblestone. After a good amount of battling, exploring, and of course, falling into pits, we'll reach the end of the dungeon. The party enters a room with a big old fountain in it, and a girl lying outside. Veronica tells us that this girl is, unsurprisingly, her sister, Serena. But what is surprising is that Serena is her twin sister. Long story short, Veronica got kidnapped by some baddies who stole her magic, which also happened to steal some of her age because... magic. Hence why she looks so young. Oh yeah, Serena's fine by the way. She's just, taking a nap in the heart of a dungeon? Okay, whatever. She's here now and she's ready to help the team get Veronica's magic back. Groovy. Then comes a wee bit more dungeon with another really weak use of a route. Seriously, these are the only routes in the game that have some crazy character moment or lore dump to reveal. Like I said, they feel almost disrespectful to the others. Following that, we get to the dungeon's boss. This lovely lad named Jarvis. I love this guy. His entire personality is just making terrible puns about storage containers. He gives off that perfect early RPG boss energy they really should, being the comical non-threat that he is. He's got Veronica's magic stored in a jar that he wants to give to some mysterious Lord of Shadows. I'm sure that's nothing to worry about though. Anyways, some shenanigans occur, and then we're in our third boss fight against Jarvis and 4 random ass shadows he's got. The fight isn't too hard, especially with Serena the NPC casting heal whenever party members get low on health, so it's pretty hard to die. Couple of these and those later, and the only container Jarvis has to worry about is his coffin. Veronica goes to get her magic back by standing in a big old purple cloud, and she emerges looking exactly the same. She got her magic back, but not her age. She doesn't seem two-faced though. She just decides to roll with her new body, continuing on with her original goal, Serena. The twin sisters hail from the land of Arboria, a city from the northeast that have always believed in the return of the Luminary when the world needed him most, and his sisters were set out to fight him and help him however they could. We go forward and rescue Connie's father, Noah, from his cell, and then return to town and get some sleep. In the morning, the twins fell hero in on their goal a bit more. They were assigned to get the Luminary to Yggdrasil, the World Tree. The one problem is they don't actually know how to do that. Luckily, Noah just happens to be informed with whom Erik is familiar. That is a really damn fortunate coincidence, huh? The party find him in a bar being a terrible father, and manage to squeeze some valuable info out of him. Basically, there's a branch of the Yggdrasil in the neighboring town, Gallopolis, that lead the Luminary to the World Tree. The quest to get the World Tree is the main story of the first half of the game. It's not the most enthralling goal, but serves as a good reason to be traveling around the world, meeting everyone, and due to the way that Yggdrasil is placed, it actually feels really good to complete, but I'll touch on that in the future. Now I don't know why it took 5 hours to find out what the main quest for half the game is, but whatever. With newfound companions and goals, the party ventures forth once again, but not before one more thing from Veronica. Right as we leave town, Veronica teaches Hero what is undoubtedly the most useful spell in the game. Zoom. Zoom is simply the fast travel spell, letting you instantly teleport to any notable landmark you visited, like towns and campfires. We can't go back to any of the starting areas yet though. Simple and amazing spell, and as a bonus it comes with the best sound effect in the game. Neat. Hotto's a pretty okay place. Good music, pretty fun but kind of annoying dungeon, a couple good additions to the party, and the most annoying gimmick for characters talking I've seen in a while, all combined to put as my least favorite section of the story that we've seen. It's not as tightly designed as anything we've seen thus far, but believe me, it gets much worse later on. Now, before we head into the desert, I believe there are some new faces in the party we need to look at.
We of Arboria swear to protect you. While we live, none shall defeat you.
The Arborian siblings are some of the simplest characters in the game. They are your dedicated spellcasters, red for offensive magic, and green for healing. That doesn't mean they aren't worth discussing though, far from it. Veronica has the highest magical mind in the game, that is her stat. To go with this, she has access to a bunch of turbo powerful spells. She shares Frizz and Sizz with 11, but also brings things like Crack, Bounce, Bang, Sap, and eventually even Magic Burst. She has a very clear-cut role in the party. Go in, blow up everything, and try not to die. Outside of the direct damage, she has some really nice debuffing spells, either inflicting stats effects or just reducing stats. With Sap especially being kinda really stupid in how good it remains for the entire game. Her skill tree just enhances her even more, with the Vim section bumping up her MP and magical might even further, and giving her even more nukes and status effects. Weapon wise, she is weird. She can wield heavy wands and whips, but do not use whips on Veronica. She has the lowest strength of any party member, and whips already have mediocre attack anyways. They're not terrible weapons, but even if you do want to use them, you get another guy real soon who can wield them. Though they're not the best on him either. Whips kinda suck actually. Heavy wands though, ho ho. More MP, more magical might, more offensive options, and most notably, a pretty dang good healing option. It doesn't restore the most HP, but it can really help in a pinch. Yeah, that's better for gameplay. Like I said, Veronica's simple, but works really well for her. Outside of gameplay though, Veronica's definitely one of my favorite members of the party. Her personality is super fun, making up for size with sass. She can, will, and does argue with anyone she can, especially Erik. And her design is really fun too. All of her art is just more expressive than everyone else's for some reason. I don't know why or what they did differently, but I'm not complaining. All of her is just fun to look at. Except in the opening cutscene. Oh god, what did they do to you? That Serena didn't turn out much better. Speaking of, Serena is exactly the opposite of Veronica, and is even simpler. She is a dedicated healer and is damn good at her job. She gets heal, zing, buff, and a bunch of spells meant to cure stats ailments. She's just meant to stick around and make sure the other party members can keep fighting fit. This also means she's one of the best characters in the game, being a necessity for bosses, especially in the late game. Her support capabilities are simply unmatched. Naturally, to balance that, her damage is total ass. 0 magical might to her name, not a single point. She only gets 1 offensive spell anyways, but Whoosh is so bad it might as well just be a consolation prize. I mean, she also gets whack, but that's its own thing. Her skill tree just further enhances what she has. Her main thing is Harpistry, a set of skills to up her magical mending, and they give her various hymns to increase the party's res to certain type of elemental damage. They're really, really good when finding the right enemy. It just makes her even more helpful in boss fights. Weapon-wise, she can equip wands and spears. Spears aren't the worst thing ever on her, but require some commitment. With her low strength, you'll need a lot of skills from the tree to make her usable, and you'll be trading off a lot of support capabilities, plus the power to use shields for damage. It sounds like it could work pretty well if you committed, but I didn't because wands are just crazy. They're exclusive to Serena, and are built around giving her more MP and preventing one-shots. There's some other abilities mixed in there, like a huge light damage attack, and the ability to dual wield wands for whatever reason. But wands are designed around enhancing Serena's support powers to the max. Serena's the opposite of her sister in more than just combat. She's a very kind and patient individual who wants nothing more than to help others. Or, in other words, she's the cleric. Yep, the classic healer trope's been around since 1997 or possibly earlier. That said, I think Serena's one of my favorite examples of the trope. I can't figure out why, but there's just a lot of moment-to-moment interactions that just make me smile. She's pure, innocent, and fun, and I really like her. Finally, it really shouldn't be too hard to figure out where the Arborian twins fall in the alignment chart. Got a really weird distribution so far, but it'll fill out eventually and start looking better. Our journey to Gallopolis is surprisingly short, because right as the party gets to the gate that we worked so hard to get to pass through, we get stopped. Not by a guard, but with this wacky dude. Oh yeah, it's also at this exact point that the demo for the game ends. It's a really nice point, giving you plenty of time to fall in love with the world and characters, but just getting started on your main quest. And if you haven't bought the whole game yet, I'd highly recommend it in case you somehow couldn't tell. This is Ickle the Tockle from Tickington. Tockles are odd beings that show up on the map from time to time, but don't really do anything. They just kind of watch you and then fade away as you get close. Except that spooky guy from the intro, but we can deal with him later. Anyways, this Ickle guy says he needs help saving Tickington, and agrees to whisk the party over there. Alright, it's also worth knowing that only Luminary can see these dudes. Everyone else thinks he's crazy. Now, Holy could open his mouth to explain what's going on. I'm sure they understand, but we can't have any of that now, can we? Now, one thing is immediately noticeable about Tickington, and I will address that elephant shortly. For now, I want to discuss the town itself. Tickington is a weird place. It's the only town you can't directly zoom to, and it's also a town that doesn't really have much to do. There's a free inn, and I think a bar of some sort, but I never bothered to check it out. Instead, Tickington holds the main side quest for the game, Echo Chambers. Throughout the world, from this point on, you'll occasionally stumble across a lone toggle. If you talk to them, they'll give you a password, and head back to Tickington. That's cool and all, but what are passwords? Well, they're used in Echo Chambers, a spooky room with 10 books in a circle. Each of these represents one of the past Dragon Quest games, and a password is used to enter a point in it. The toggles here notice that something strange is messing up the pages in the book, and basically messing up time, so it needs some outside help to fix everything up. Even as someone who has no connection has never played any of the older Dragon Quest games, passwords aren't a bad idea, and they seem like a really fun way to reference the older titles. That said, they're almost impressively terrible in execution. There are tons of problems with how Echo Chambers work, but a lot of it can be boiled down to its structure. Once you strip away all the fluff and show of nostalgia, you're left with the world's biggest fetch quest. About half the Echo Chambers are part of some expansive fetch quest that is conceptually flawed in so many ways. Like, say you've got an NPC for Dragon Quest IV World who's looking for something for Dragon Quest VII World. For starters, the NPC in 4 will probably say something like, "Man, I sure could use a cool rock from this place." Except it'll probably be phrased in a way that only makes sense if you know 7, like referencing some event from that game. This is fine if you know the series well, but if you don't, it's completely arbitrary. But if you do know where to go, there's also the problem of getting the password. You don't get these things in any sort of order. Sometimes you'll find somebody from a past setting wanting something from a different game, only get the password to travel to that location 50 hours later into the game, making it even more confusing. My best recommendation if you want to do these things for whatever reason, is just get every single one of them unlocked, and then head to Tickington with a guide and knock them all out at once. Luckily, not every quest is like this. Only about half of them are. The other half are simple mini dungeons, but those aren't much better. In fact, they may be even worse for one simple reason. 2D mode. A little while back, I did a deep analysis on the game's combat system. It's not the most game-changing, innovative RPG formula I've seen, but it feels like one of the best versions of the standard formula. There were two main reasons for this: turn order and random encounters. 2D mode entirely does away with both of these. The only enemies that show up on the map are bosses, as everything else magically appears like they did in games of old, making every area with them feel just as obnoxious to explore as it did with RPGs 30 years ago. And the turn ordering just helps make things even more infuriating. 2D mode returns to the restaurant style of turn ordering, which is substantially less fun to play with, as it feels like you have much less control when battling, making it far less engaging. A lot of my battles in 2D mode just resort to mashing A to get through them as soon as possible, only to stumble across another random encounter seconds later. Don't worry though, it gets worse. 2D mode makes a change that turns from a minor annoyance into actually detrimental, that being the lack of information. One absolutely vital thing in any RPG, nay, any game, is knowing what stats, effects, buffs, and debuffs are present on your team and your enemies. Knowing this can completely change how you play around a fight, as you may have to hold off on doing some sort of action until an effect wears off. Now, it would be a monumentally stupid thing to make an alternate mode where you can't see this integral information, so nobody on the planet would be moronic enough to actually put that in the game. Yeah, 2D mode is generous enough to let you see stats effects on your party, but that's it. You can't tell when a buff is about to wear off, you can't see what your enemies currently have, you can't see how long your stats effects last, nothing. So unless you grab a pen and paper, you're gonna be in the dark about this information that you absolutely should not be in the dark about. Who the hell designed this mode? That's not even the end of my gripes with 2D mode. Ho no. Let's look at the part of 2D mode that there is to actually look at. The graphics. They are fine. I've seen better sprites in games, I've seen worse, that's not the problem. They're really not my cup of tea, especially the character sprites, but they're fine. The thing is, why? Why would you want your game to look like this instead of this? Did I mention, you can play through the entire game in 2D mode. I have no fucking idea why you want to subject yourself to this torture, but the option is there. Anyways, the game looks about 500 times better in 3D. I also think it was designed that way. Even when not focusing on the graphics alone, so many things you just can't experience in 2D mode. The game's voice acting and beautiful soundtrack, the amazing player and enemy animations, the critical slow-mo, the breathtakingly cool spell animations, the background objects that you only see when messing around the camera, the ability to walk around battles, every character's idle animations, which add so much to them, and maybe the biggest offender of all, Yggdrasil, but more on that later. There's just so much of this game you don't get by playing in 2D mode, and what does it have to offer? A more authentic, old-school Dragon Quest experience. Gee, if I wanted one of those, I'd probably go and play one of the older Dragon Quest games that was designed around being in 2D. 2D mode removes so many of the things I love about this game. I recommend steering clear from it as much as possible if you have any appreciation for the game. Now I have a few closing notes about Tickington before we move on. First off, if you don't want to help the toggles, or rather experience the horrors of 2D mode, you can just leave as soon as you get the first password. Honestly, I'd recommend doing this. It'll save you at least half an hour of misery. Secondly, Tickington is the only area of the game we're forced into duty mode, and I don't really get why. On the 3DS version of the game, which apparently exists and probably looks like complete garbage, Tickington is a fully modeled 3D location, so they totally could have just upscaled it and let us roam free, and maybe do all the quests there in 3D as well. It wouldn't fix all the problems, but it would make them that much more bearable. Thirdly, all books are named after their respective subtitle. Like the book for Dragon Quest II is the Altar of the Legendary Line, and they're all like this, with 2 exceptions. Dragon Quest I, not having a subtitle, is simply the Altar of Origins, but Dragon Quest X is weird. It was like akin to an MMO, but was never localized in English. But rather than give it a proper translation, they just call it the Altar of the Undeciphered, which is actually hilarious. Finally, if you collect all the passwords, some crazy stuff happens, but I think I'll talk about that when we're supposed to have them all complete, which happens to be after you beat the entire game all the way. So we will return to Tickington, but not for a long time. Oh yeah, bottom tier of the story. It's a town with events happening, so it counts. And even if it doesn't, I really just want to put it at the bottom anyways. After that small detour, we cross through the border into the Gallopolis region. The area is a desert, with enemies naturally themed around that. This area is also absolutely massive for some reason. This is by far the largest region we've seen, with the exception of Heliodor Field. There isn't too much we have access to yet, so the best thing to do is just head into town, for now. The city of Gallopolis is comparable to Heliodor in size, and has just as many things to do. You've got all the normal shops, a church, a building with a wacky lock on it, and even a traveling circus. Even the party is impressed with this place, and Veronica informs everyone that the city is known for its horse races, and we just so happen to be in town at the time of the festival. What are the odds? Anyways, there's some fun things to do around town. Firstly, you head into the church to check out a cabinet, where you can get the first outfit, which is Hero's hood from when he and Erik were on the run. I haven't mentioned outfits yet, and I really don't need to, they kinda speak for themselves. Additionally, and far more importantly, there's a bunny girl near the inn who will offer you a one-on-one puff. The party has some great dialogue for this, where the girl's scolding you, but Erik being oddly into it. The girl blindfolds you for the puff, supposedly to add for the experience, only to pull the old swap and blow on you with her dad. Yeah, good luck explaining that one to Erik. Have I mentioned this game is pretty weird yet? Once you've had your fun poking around town, the palace is where you need to go to progress the plot. It's a pretty impressive looking building, though actually only has 3 rooms. After going up, the king, he basically tells you to shove off because he's preparing for the Sand National and the official knighting of his son, who magically materializes upon being mentioned. Unlike his father, the prince is actually willing to hear us out about the Rainbow, which is the name of the Yggdrasil branch, and after inviting the party in his room, he quickly shifts us over to the circus so we can talk more privately. Now before you head over there, you gotta make sure you fulfill your duty as a loyal citizen by robbing the rich. Nothing scares the 1% more than stealing their underwear right from under their noses. Later that night, the group meets in the circus tent to discuss all manner of things. Now for an exquisite show put on by the one and only Sylvando, the amazing circus performer, and oh, what a show it is! Juggling, fire tricks, and everything else you could want in a circus performance, presented by the amazing Sylvando, no less. Truly fantastic. But that's not why we're here. The prince dumps a whole bunch of stuff on us, but here's the summary. Yeah, this guy sucks. The prince, whose name is Faris, is the classic archetype of a character who lies about pretty much everything. In this case, being a good knight, being a good racer, being a good prince, being a good son, and being good, well, anything except lying. While it may not be entirely new, I really like how well Faris does the trope, mostly because his voice actor gives him this wimpy-ass voice that makes him sound all the more pitiful, and really helps us sell how much of a colossal loser this guy really is.
And yet I have no choice, for the Prince of Gallopolis not to take part in the Sand National on the year of his coming of age is unthinkable! Unthinkable!
Basically, he brought the party here because the big old race is tomorrow, but he can't ride a horse to save his life. So he wants 11 to be his double and go instead, granting us the Rainbow in return. Seems like a pretty good deal, not that we have much of a choice. The fact that this prick will openly mock the party about. What a dude. Anyway, we do the deal and leave the circus for the evening. Fast forward a bit, it's time for the race. This is a nice change of pace from the standard gameplay, and is pretty effortless to win. Still fun, just easy. Plus, Lunar gets to don some sick-ass armor for his impersonation. Oh yeah, and the great Sylvando gets to show off his amazing powers to materialize wherever he feels like. Must be some sort of jester magic. Once it's over, the princely moron gets congratulations for things he didn't do. But, fortunately, the pendulum swings both ways. As some rando NPC comes rushing in to announce the Slayer of the Sands is back, His Majesty announces that his son will defeat the beast, the prince recruits you again, and off you go. Before you leave the city, though, Sylvando materializes in front of the party, again, and offers to join them. He gets shot down pretty quickly because he's a circus performer, but he just kinda tags along anyways. He becomes a temporary 5th party member for this stretch of the game. Oh yeah, we're back in the actual game now. The party has to head down south all the way to this point in the peninsula, and it's quite the trek. Plenty of battles to be had on the way. So now seems like a pretty good time to discuss an interesting part of this game's battle system. Every RPG has them, but like most things every RPG has, this game does them really well. It's time for critical hits. Crits are a staple of practically every game, and they are always immensely satisfying to land, but incredibly infuriating to be hit by. Dragon Quest is no exception to these, but I wouldn't be doing a whole section on crits if they were worth talking about. First off, landing crits in this game is actually really unlikely. You get a 1% crit chance for every 200 points of dex you have, which is a lot. Names that Erik, and later on Jade, are gonna be critting substantially more than everyone else. Both those characters also have tons of options of their skill tree to enhance crit chance, and Jade especially can use claws, which have a stupidly high base crit chance, and attack twice. I ran claws on Jade in my first run, and by the end of the game she was critting with those things every other attack. Really, you can't actually land a random crit with any weapon that hits multiple foes, like boomerangs or whips. A very strange choice. There's also a ton of skills that increase your guaranteed crit chances, but I'll cover the noble ones when we get to them. While we're here, I gotta cover crit sounds really fast. They are one of the many reasons critical hits are so satisfying to land, and Dragon Quest XI is no slouch when it comes to sound design. The crit sound consists of these 3 notes I can only assume were recorded in outer space because I have no idea how they were made. It sounds really powerful, but still some of that old school charm if that makes any sense. Like, he uses the same design ideas as the crit sound of Dragon Quest 1, but plays with them differently. It sounds different from a normal modern games version of a crit noise. If that doesn't make any sense, don't worry. Insane Ramblings are a signature here at Starman Industries, and gets chalked up as more proof of me going crazy. Now I've played a fair few games in my time. I've seen a couple of ways to calculate crit damage. 2 times, 3 times, 1.5 times, all sorts of wacky multipliers. But Dragon Quest has what is undoubtedly my favorite calculation. Crits in this game will do a bit of extra damage, but more importantly, will completely and entirely ignore enemy defense. This is huge. Firstly, it means that crits will become more valuable as you get later into the game, as enemies will start having naturally higher defenses, so you can see huge damage at the end of the game. But wait, there's more. Enemies with naturally high defense, notably any metal or robotic enemy, will also get shredded by crits, since they tend to have lower HP to compensate. And nowhere is that more apparent than the star of this section, metal slimes. Metal slimes are some of my favorite enemies in any game ever. They have such an interesting design and are implemented in such a weird way, but they're so fun to come across. Metal slimes are Dragon Quest's version of the XP dump enemy. You know the ones. They're hard to find, harder to kill, but if you defeat them, you'll be absolutely showered in XP. And metal slimes have some of the best implementation of any version of these I've seen. They have tons of void, capped out defense, but only 3 hit points, and they tend to run from battle. Anytime you stumble across a metal slime, it becomes a race to see if you can hit it 3 times before it retreats, and it is a ton of fun. There are some tools to help you kill these slippery buggers, most notably the sword skill Metal Slash, a guaranteed hit on metal slimes that can do 1 or 2 damage. Doesn't sound all impressive, but hitting these guys is most of the trouble of killing them, and having a chance to deal double damage with a 100% hit is invaluable. Or, bring everything full circle, if you can land a crit on Metal Slime, they're done. Since crits totally pierce defense, and they have about as much HP as a fly, critting these guys is gonna be the easiest way to ensure that XP is yours. The problem is, like I mentioned, actually critting them is pretty tough, but I'm absolutely positive there was not a single thing on the planet more satisfying than it. So, why are bringing critical hits now? Well, it's because the Slayer of the Sands can crit you. It's not very fun. The Slayer is definitely the most difficult boss at this point. Not only critting you, but also increasing defense, blinding the party, confusing party members, and also just doing a ton of damage. In my battle with him, Serena was confused for basically the whole thing, leaving me without a solid healer. 11 can cast heal, but everybody was always under half health for most of the battle. Luckily, Sylvando was still hanging around. He can snap party members out of confusion, and he can dish out some pretty respectable damage, which helps a lot if using all your turns healing or missing. The fight's not all too difficult, but can provide a nice challenge. Though with some pretty strong single enemies on the path up to the fight, it shouldn't be anything you can't handle. After the fight, Prince Nitwit claims the body and the glory of the monster's defeat. Savannah makes some witty comment on him and then dematerializes, leaving the party all alone, confused as ever. It's times like this that I really value Zoom. Back in the city, the prince is showing off a cool bug he found to everyone. The Slayer doesn't really like this, so wakes up for a snap and starts causing ruckus. Everyone realizes the prince can just trounce him again, but naturally, this area starts quaking in his boots at the sight of it. But then, out of nowhere, again, Sylvando appears on top of a pole, helps Freeze remember what it truly means to be a knight, standing tall in the face of danger, protecting the weak, and putting your life on the line for the greater good. With the newfound motivation, Freeze attempts battle with the Slayer. He gets stomped, but with some help from Sylvando, the beast falls again. As Freeze stands dumbfounded about how the hell his gay lunatic is so good with a sword, Sylvando reminds everyone that he's just a jester, nothing more. I really like this scene. It's a good payoff to everything Freeze has been working towards in the part of the story, and even though he didn't do anything against the Slayer, he stood up to it and tried, showing that he really does care about protecting the people of Gallopolis, despite what it may seem like. It makes me excited to see what it'll be like when we circle around to Gallopolis later. Afterwards, the party heads on to see the Sultan by getting the rainbow, and, surprise surprise, it's not here. He had to sell to fund the huge race, which is actually a pretty nice way of connecting seemingly unrelated threads. The buyer was supposedly heading west to Gondolia, and so our grand fetch quest continues onward. But, as a consolation prize, the prince gives us a crossbow, and I'll talk about that thing at length soon enough. Before leaving the city, but after defying the laws of gravity with some help from NPCs, you'll never guess who's hanging out on top of a large structure to see us. Sylvando decided he wants to join the party on our quest to save the universe, and despite the best wishes of at least half the party, he joins us with the promise of having a boat in Gondolia, which concludes Gallopolis. While it may be ultimately useless thanks to the rainbow constantly getting moved about, everything here is pretty dang nice. The desert setting is rather unique, the boss is a fun challenge, Prince Freeze is a nice side character with a satisfying arc, and Sylvando is Sylvando. I'd give it a low 8 here. Good town, but not as good as everything that went down in Heliodor. Before we march on over to Gallopolis, we have a new party member. Sylvando marks party member number 5, but the party can only hold 4 people. You can switch out party members at basically any time. There are 2 notable things about your lineup. Firstly, XP share is a thing, thank god, so you don't have to worry about your undeployed party members falling behind. And secondly, hero does not have to be deployed. This is something that really surprised me, as most JRPGs, even in modern times, still force the main character on field. But having the option to take him out entirely makes party composition all the more interesting for us. Hell, I love it. Anyways, as for the 5th party member himself.
What I'm trying to say, darlings, is that we all want the same thing. So you see, I have to come with you. Oh, don't all squeal at once now.
With how tightly designed this game is, there are no bad party members. Since there's so few, and all of them have unique skills, spells, and weapons, they'll have plenty of reasons to be fielded. That said, Sylvando's the weakest among them by a laughably large margin. Sylvando's designed to be a sort of jack of all trades, balancing support, damage, magic, and layer defense. The main problem is simply that the party already has an all-rounder, and one who's simply better at being an all-rounder. Not only this is weird selection of spells and weapons, Sylvando can wield swords, whips, and knives, which is a bizarre group. He's the only whip user other than Veronica, but since he can use swords, also if someone else wielding them, he'll want to be using that. Whips are generally weak weapons with mediocre damage, hit rates, and skills, except for one insane one that won't be locked for a long while. Knives don't even bother. Compared to using them on Erik with his dual wielding and exclusive dually deadly, Sylvando's damage is pitiful. Now that leaves swords. The party already has 2 other guys that can use swords, and there's another user later on, but if using great swords on Luminary, swords on Sylvando are a no-brainer. They get some awesome skills, and let them wield a much needed shield. And with how common they are, you'll be getting upgrades constantly. Whips aren't terrible, but losing out on high single target damage and shields puts the already shaky character into an even weirder state. Now as for Sylvando's spells, they're spells alright. The main problem here is one of the starting spells, Re-Heal. So, when you see an injured party member, your first thought is going to be to heal them, naturally. Now, any regular healing spell would just give them a big old chunk of HP and everyone would move on with their lives, because that's what makes sense. But then along comes Re-Heal. Re-Heal heals a pitifully small amount, but restores some HP to the target at the start of every one of their turns for a while. I think it may out-heal altogether, but the problem is, when you want healing, you want it all right then. Otherwise, the enemy could just waltz on over and knock out your squishy unit with 20 more hit points than they had before they got healed. It's like the Tribleman Shiv in TF2. It does more damage, sure, but in the scenarios you want to use it, you need instant damage and lots of it. Sylvando's offensive spell isn't much better. He gets Whoosh and Swoosh, which he shares with Serena. They're alright spells, not nearly as good as the other group targeters, like my beloved Zap. The problem is that he doesn't get the next tier of it for no reason, because Swoosh and Kaswoosh are spells in the game, and Serena learns them, but Sylvando just doesn't? Huh? The rest of his spells and his kit solidify his place in the alignment chart. All of the Jester's other spells are buffers, Acceleratal, Cock-a-doodle-doo, and the seriously awesome Oomph. Pair these with the debuffing and status inflicting skills he learns, and Sylvando lands himself with the perfect spot for physical support. He sort of feels like the item guy, if that makes sense. Like, he's not particularly good at any one thing, so he's the guy to use a reviving item or something when you need it. And sacrificing his turn for that isn't much of a loss. He's not a useless party member, he just struggles to find a solid reason to take the spot of anyone else. Until he doesn't. Yeah, in Act 3, this guy elevates himself to become one of the best members of your entire team with some utterly insane skills he gets. The problem is, that's about 60 hours from now. But I'll talk about this guy again when he gets juiced up. Oh yeah, he's also insanely gay, which is awesome. It makes sense that he's a performer, since he steals the show whenever he's on screen. With the token LGBT character in tow, the party ventures forth to Gondolia. Before you get into the actual town, you pass through one of my favorite areas in this entire game. This tiny little coastline. Seeing the desert turn back into lush green grass with a shiny water on each side of you, it's a really small area that you spend at most 5 minutes in, but still one of my favorites, and it feels wrong not to mention it. In between here and there, there's also a whole swamp area with a big tree fort in it. As far as swamp areas in games go, it's pretty nice. The tree fort has a cool design, and you get this dude to fly around on, giving you access to areas off the walking path. Mounts that let you expand the area you can explore are easily my favorite ones. They feel like a really nice upgrade. I'll let the devs hide some collectibles in cheeky locations. I don't know why the team decided to put so much damn effort into the weird transition area in between two towns, but I am all for it. Anyways, about time we actually get to this place, huh? Most towns in Dragon Quest XI are based on some real life location, and Gondolia is probably the most obvious homage of them all. It's just like real life Venezuela! The town is a narrow stretch with 2 more paths on each side, and a big circular stage at the end, and water surrounding the whole thing, giving way into a bay. Nice looking place, but we don't have time for sightseeing. We have a boat to catch. Well, before that there is one thing I gotta point out, and that's these 2 shopkeepers and their weird side quest. They're both selling an outfit for Veronica at a whopping 12,000 gold, at a point in the game where we have about a tenth of that. Seems completely unreasonable, but every time I talk to one of them about the offer, they'll lower it a little bit to try to beat the other, constantly trying to lower it to convince you until it gets down to the point where it only costs 1,000 gold. It's a great side quest. Sure, it may just consist of running back and forth between 2 NPCs for 5 minutes, but goddamn if I didn't have a huge smile on my face for that whole 5 minutes. Plus, the outfit's just hilarious. Totally worth it. Now, where were we? Oh yeah, getting the boat. Yeah, it turns out the piers closed off for the annual Senior Universo Strongman event. Now, I know what you're thinking. Gee, isn't it kind of weird that this is happening the same week as Gallopolis' race thing, which is also the same week that the Luminary departs? And my answer to that is, RPG. At this point, the party temporarily splits, with Erik and Hero wanting to see the town's leader, Doge Rotondo, and everyone else wandering around and seeing the sights. Going to see the Doge is rather unproductive though. He seems friendly enough at first, but as soon as he lays eyes on Eleven's haircut, he shuts the door on us. That's probably nothing to worry about though. Meeting up with the rest of the party, things aren't faring much better, as Veronica's, yet again, in argument. Though this time it's with someone her own size. Hardly the first time and certainly won't be the last. Wonder how much her VA got paid for shouting into the mic so much. Anyways, this kid stole her wand in hopes of using its magic to heal his friend who got his voice stolen away. Serena succeeds on a medicine check and realizes that he can be cured with nectar that takes water from a sacred fountain, and wouldn't you know it, there just so happens to be one nearby. What are the odds? And thus the journey to the next dungeon begins. While calling the walk to the Grotta della Fonte was just translated to Fountain Cave. A journey is stretching the definition a bit. It's just one screen over and through another weirdly good in-between area. It is kind of worth noting this is the furthest area you can walk to from the door of departure. I really like how interconnected every part of this world is, and you can just walk from one point to another. This is the best example, but it's worth mentioning now. The dungeon is a dank cave full of all sorts of terrifying creatures, snails, shell wizards, frogs that jump scare you, and horny bat demons. That's a new one, and it's also the introduction of the offensive Puff Puff. I'm not sure about the offensive utility of giving someone a sloppy toppy in the middle of battle, but it seems to work. Funny thing is, each character has a hidden stat that serves as their chance to resist this move. I couldn't find the stats themselves, but I'm pretty sure that all the girls in Sylvando are almost entirely immune, and it has around a 50% chance of working on the starting bros. And Rab, once we get him, is guaranteed. We'll see why eventually. Anyways, funny enemies, but I'm gonna have to ask them not to try that on Veronica again, thank you very much. The dungeon overall feels kinda empty though. The previous 2 had twisting corridors full of traps, puzzles, and side paths. While the grotto has some of these, it's not nearly to the same extent, and the whole dungeon feels kinda half-hearted. I guess part of this comes down to the party's stakes, or lack thereof. There's no sibling in need of help, or object vitally important to some character. It's just a puddle of water that helps some rando NPC we met for about 3 minutes. The devs seem to know this and didn't really put as much emphasis on this dungeon, making it sort of blend in with the rest of the story. Like, it's not bad, but the most memorable thing for this whole dungeon for me was my first successful attempt at sealing something with half-inch, and it did not take so long for a lack of trying. Nowhere is this forgetfulness more apparent than the boss. The previous dungeons had these funny guys with some nifty dialogue to listen to in the room before their beatdown, to get to know them a bit, before you beat the snot out of them. But this time the boss is just hanging out there, and you just walk into him and there you go. It's an anticlimactic finish to an anticlimactic dungeon. That's not even mentioning how little of a threat these guys actually pose. A quick zoom back to Gondolia and, okay, a minor gripe. Gondolia is like the only location in the game, aside from Tickington I guess, where zooming doesn't actually take you to the town, but rather this weird tunnel in between the town and the swamp. I don't know what the point this is, other than making you sit through 2 loading screens, but I don't like it. Anyways, quick zoom back to Gondolia, and the party find themselves in the middle of the Senior Universal contest. What are the odds? While Sylvando and the girls go to get the medicine, Erik and Eleven are once again stuck with the grunt work of trying to find seats for the contest, so the missing members can get a good look at all the big burly men. Walking through the town is pretty fun, getting to see everyone getting all pumped up about the contest, with excitement only rising as you get close to the stage at the end of town. However, something is wrong. Very wrong. So, while Hendrik was chasing Hero and Erik around on his noble steed, Jasper, being the brains of the operation, decided to go where we ended up via nautical travel. And now we have our grand reunion. The last time we saw this guy was back in Heliodor Castle, but we never actually got to see what it's like having him as our enemy, simply the horrible repercussions that came from it. And facing him directly isn't much easier. Jasper immediately gets the entire town against the Luminary by accusing him of being the Darkspawn, and then surrounds the duo. You're then thrust into battle against Heliodorian guards, who don't pose much of a threat, but more so just exist to sap your resources. After a decently lengthy fight, the duo are still totally surrounded with no clear way out. But there are more than 2 people in the party. The duo are saved by... While Veronica racks up property damage charges, the duo sneak away to Serena, or at least try to. But Jasper isn't gonna be fooled by the classic look over there trick. He attempts to cast some dark spell on Hero, only for Erik to jump in front of it, and then willingly get himself captured to help Hero. It's a really nice showcase of his character, demonstrating he's willing to essentially sacrifice himself for the greater good of our mute protagonist's journey. What follows is some good old Metal Gear Solid stealth. The party starts back in this corner and has to make their way all the way up to the stage, following indirect paths. Honestly, this sequence is one of my favorites in the whole game. It exists to test your knowledge of the town, after giving you 2 chances to aimlessly wander around it. The stealth segment blocks off all the conventional roads, flipping the town's design on its head, and making all the fun alternate routes our main method of travel. It's a fantastic way to retread something we're already familiar with, while putting an interesting twist on it and needing the player to approach from a different angle. Oh, and 2 more things. This is the first time we hear the full version of the ballad music, as battles use a shortened one for some reason, and of course, it's really good. And finally, oh, perfection. After some sneaking and flanking with gondolas, the party ends up behind Jasper. After some more accusations fly, he finally faces us in direct combat. Jasper puts up a real fight. He attacks twice and can parry with swords, uses dark magic that nobody in the party knows, and prevents our heroes from casting spells, absolutely shutting down 2 of them. He's tough, with some teamwork, and Sylvando getting that exact same crit again somehow, he eventually falls, and gives exactly 2,000 XP in gold. How nice. Jasper, being the cunning devil he is, won't be defeated so easily by measly turn-based combat. He has swarms of soldiers and isn't about to let us run free. Luckily, Sylvando has a great plan that involves jumping off a balcony into the water below, and he's never seen again for the rest of the game. Nah, just kidding. He was going to get his boat, and oh, what a boat it is. With the surprise introduction of the salty stallion and shirtless hunk of a helmsman Dave, the party are able to deja vu their way out of Jasper's clutches and onto the seas, where the troubles aren't quite over. A monstrous beast rises from the seas, which Jasper introduces as his tentacular, and is getting ready to crush the ship. But if you're worried about fighting this thing, don't be. All of the merchant ships from Gondolia come to our aid by scaring it off with cannons, as the weird kid who has his voice back explains the story. Basically, he saw Jasper talk to the tentacular and plotting something, but Jasper, being the noble knight of Heliodor, cursed the kid and pushed all the blame onto the Darkspawn. And after we helped him get his voice back, he told the true story to the Doge, and now here we are. Nice little explanation to tie everything together. It also throws Jasper's morals into question, as if burning down your home village didn't already do that. At this point, it's clear he's not somebody you want to be enemies with, and doesn't really have any limits on how far he'll go to stop you. It'll be interesting to see what he does next time we cross paths. After a bit of rest, Dolphy lets the party know of the situation with the Rainbow. It was bought by some merchant who was heading to the Zwaardsrust region, northeast of Gondolia. And so, with a shiny new boat to travel the boundless seas with, the party ventures forth, yet again, to locations yet unknown. Overall, I think Gondolia is one of the better segments of the game, especially in part 1. The town itself is unique and fun to explore, and the stealth segment requiring you to look at the town in a whole new way is simply brilliant. Getting to see Jasper for the first time in like 15 hours is nice, especially with him showing what it's really like to have him as an enemy. The things holding this back are the mediocre dungeon, and the fact that the party don't have any actual stakes to play until Jasper arrives. It makes the first half of the segment feel very side questy, illustrated further by the weird dungeon without a real boss. But even with that, the dungeon's still fun, and it doesn't sour the area enough to bring it down that far. Gondolia ends up in A tier, right under Heliodor. Best we've had in a little while, and I'm glad to say it won't hold a title for long. But before we get to that, we have a boat now. It'd be a shame for us not to do some sea travel, eh? Let's see what awaits on the waters. Crazy as it sounds, things play differently when we're on a boat rather than on foot. The most notable difference is the map. Previously we were but an ant, walking across Eerie looking at cool trees, buildings, and other small things like that. But on a boat, ho, you can see everything. Putting the destination on the other side of the bay was definitely an intentional choice by the devs. Getting to soar past all the areas you just spent the last 10 hours walking across makes you feel all the power and freedom of your luxurious new upgrade. And the sights you can see, oh, it's beautiful. I've talked about Eerie as a continent before, and you can open the map of it anytime. But the boat really puts into perspective just how big the world is. It's massive and oh, so full. Getting to gaze upon all the cities, beaches, temples, towers, and everything. And most impressively, the world tree. This is the closest we've been to Yggdrasil the whole game, and the boat really puts into perspective just how huge it is. Seriously, getting to see Yggdrasil in all its glory just over yonder is my favorite part of the boat. It's seriously wonderful. Okay, so that's just moving and looking around the boat. I should probably talk about what we're actually doing on this damn thing, huh? There actually isn't much the boat itself does. We use it to move from one place to another, which I guess should be obvious, but it's where you can go that's most important. Riding the boat grants access to docks, and more importantly, islands. Throughout the water, there are around a dozen islands strewn about. They can dock in for some fun side adventures. Most have enemies, some goodies, and a locked chest we can't open. Yet. This is the formula for most of them, so a lot of them really aren't worth talking about. There are some standouts, but I'll cover them when they come up. There's only one in the bay anyways, named after Australia for some reason. Oh yeah, we're also trapped in a bay now. There's a gate westward, but I can't be bothered to go over there, and it only gets unlocked later anyways. Now, normally I'd scour an entire area in this game immediately for everything it has to offer, but not the sea. Why is that? Well, it's the reinduction of my old enemy. Why it was so close to being perfect. After suffering through more than my fair share of random encounters, seriously, look at this. Why are they here? I'm right there! We eventually dock in Zwaardsrust. After tracking progress relative to Yggdrasil, the party ventures onward into one of the most unique areas of the game. Zwaardsrust is nothing more than ruins of a mighty kingdom. What was once a nation as powerful as the Great Heliodor was reduced to nothing but rubble overnight, an event we saw in the opening cutscene. The area is now nothing more than farmland with an inn nearby. There are remnants of the nation, but after all this time, nothing's been done with them. The ruins are covered by tough enemies and poison, but there are some interesting secrets within. 2 doors, one locked, the other magically sealed, lie underground, hidden by poison and stairs. They don't do anything now, but they really stand out from the ruins, and will remain in the mind of the player. There's also a really interesting side quest here. There's a priest at the end who wants you to take care of some skeletons that roam the area, but these aren't any regular skeletons. They are, or were, the soldiers defending Zwaardsrust on that one fateful night. After being felled in battle, they were tormented by their failure and roamed the region at night, attacking anyone in sight. Yet use the pet power to perform a sacred prayer for the fallen, to help their souls find peace and return to the world tree. There's a lot of quests that are just, oh, use this pet power on this guy, but this one's special. It feels like it has meaning, purpose. It helps the player learn more about the tragedy that occurred here, which will be a big theme coming up. You then enter this absolutely insane area. It's a huge lake that's legitimately one of the most beautiful areas in the whole game. The drier grass contrasted so well with the greens and blues of the trees and lake, and with the rolling mountains and flowing waterfalls in the background. I seriously had to just stop and look around for a while. It's areas like this that make me love this game. The little in-between zones where the devs could have just put a hallway or a plane or something, but instead they give us this. It's incredible. You also get that beat mount from the swamp to ride out around on again, and it's just as fun as last time. Seriously one of the best mounts in the game. Oh hey, Jarvis! I see they demoted you, a real bummer, man. While Zwaardsrust may be long gone, new settlements will rise to replace the old. And while not nearly as great in scale, Octagonia is the main city now occupying the area, and is the next step in our grand MacGuffin hunt. Octagonia is a decently large fortress, where all the construction effort went into defenses and not names. It's heavily walled and filled with stone buildings and neon signs, somehow. and has a massive statue of Sir Hendrik smack dab in the middle of town, much to the dismay of Erik. Octagonia's main tourist attraction is its arena built on top of the city, where people go to beat the crap out of each other in tournaments. And wouldn't you know it, there just so happens to be one of those happening now, the Masked Martial Arts Tournament. So was that 3-4 great town events happening in a week? These guys suck at planning. Walking around town, you can hear talk, and even see some of the competitors who will take part in the tourney, and their adoring fans. As one weird stalker insult, but let's not talk about him. Anyways, seems like a good event to sit back and watch, maybe take a break from all the hard travels. But of course, fate is not so kind to our heroes. Lo and behold, the Rainbow. The thing we've been chasing around the world for the past 10 hours? It's right up there, and is the grand prize for winning the MMA. So there's only one thing to do. Enter the tourney and beat the living bejesus out of everyone in our way. The tourney also pairs up 2 random competitors to keep things spicy. 11's draw number is 11, which is a really funny sentence to read. The party have varying thoughts on the situation, ranging from Sylvando being excited to see buff guys beating each other up, to Erik reminding us they were still fugitives, to Serena talking about the run-out prize, an orange orb. She remembers reading about it in some textbooks back in Arboria, but also looks pretty similar to that orb Erik holds so dear. Huh. Ah, the draw. This plays a big part in determining the winners, because nobody wants to get stuck with some scrub. 11's called first, and boy did we get lucky with our partner. We get paired with the girl who looks like she's seen her fair share of fighting, as more than capable of yeah, never mind. This egg-shaped Scottish old guy comes up and changes the rules right before everyone's eyes to ensure he's paired with the girl. What a prick. But it may have turned out in our favor. Our new partner is none other than Vince Vanquish, last year's champion. Dang, this guy really grew up since Dragon Quest VIII, huh? Everyone's pretty jealous of us getting paired up with the amazing Vince. Except Sylvando, he has something else he's doing. And then, get this. Upon returning downstairs, we find Veronica in an argument with somebody, with both of them shouting insults at each other. What is this, the 3rd time now? But then, the absolute Chad, Vince, comes in and talks about learning to accept bad days and looking out for yourself. What a dude. He also barges into 11's room the next day to bring him to the arena. No rest for the weary, huh? Nothing gets one more pumped up than some good old gladiatorial combat. The first round of the tourney sees the duo paired up against 2 muscle maniacs known as the Underdigger and the Abominable Showman. They aren't too happy about this matchup. The fights in the arena use a remix of the Dragon Quest IV battle theme, which is a nice break from the norm. Naturally, they're all 2v2s against mini-boss type enemies, and, at least in the first round, they don't put up much of a fight. Aside from having a pep power, they slam their asses into you. I've mentioned that this game's pretty weird sometimes, but Vince is actually a really good partner. He fights with his claws, does a pretty nice amount of damage, along with absorbing hits with his infinite HP when enemies target him, but, best of all, he can heal you, which really gives you freedom for offensive attacks. But yeah, they go down pretty easy. After finishing the fight, the Invincibles go on to watch the next round, which doesn't go too well. Erik's participating with some rando NPC, and they get smoked by Jade and Rab, the 2 weirdos who insist on being partnered up. Or rather, Erik's getting smoked by Jade. Rab just kinda sits around and watches. Weird. Now, get this. After exiting the arena, we find Veronica yelling at someone. Wow! Never seen this one. Except this time it's Erik, and she's basically just telling him he has a skill issue. Rab and Jade materialize, say to watch out for Vince, and then vanish into the sunset. Oh yeah, there's also some missing persons case going on, where a bunch of the competitors in the tournament have gone, well, missing. Erik suggests we go make sure our trusted companion is alright, which is mostly just an excuse to show what Vince does, but that's alright. After almost getting our face smashed in, we learn that Vince is an orphan. He grew up in the Octagonia orphanage and still lives there to this day. He watches over the kids, and he used the prize money last year to help the place out, which is also what he wants to do this time around. Not exactly winning any awards for creativity, but it's a nice drive, and solidifies him as a nice person who really means well. Fast forward a touch, it's time for the next battle, putting the Invincibles against the Beady Queens, a duo of Cinderella and Wambolina. Octagonians cannot name a town, but boy can they make fun nicknames. They're a bigger problem than the last two, since Cinderella can cast spells, most notably mid-heal. But take her down first and then go for the Sword Slinger and they're not much of a problem. Or just wait for her to run out of MP. Now that's pretty funny. No rest before the next fight either, we just jump right in. This time, the duo is put up against the Bullion Boys, a team of Golden Boy and a mysterious figure named Sterling Silva. Nobody knows who this guy is. He has some similarities to Sylvando, but since he has the skill I've been desperately trying to get Sylvando to learn, but he still doesn't have enough SP to do so, it couldn't possibly be him, right, Silva? To get juiced up for the next battle, Vince takes a swig of the G Fuel he carries with him, and thus starts the semi-finals. These guys are actually pretty tough. They don't have much health, but they both do a considerable amount of damage, especially with Golden Boy being able to hit both party members with every attack. Glass cannons, but one you need to play carefully around. After the Sterling Silva vanishes, it's right into the final bout. To the surprise of absolutely nobody, the Invincibles are put against Rab and Jade's Princess in the Pudding. Must be Outlanders, nobody in Octagonia would think of a name that bad. Bit of hyping up, a tad of G Fuel, and some suspicious looks from both sides fly, leading right into the grand finale. Big surprise, these two are freaking tough. Jade hits hard, being able to take out a noticeable chunk of health in one blow. Rab's a spellcaster, with access to mid-heal, the group attacking crack, and some strong dark magic. Most annoyingly, both have easy ways to make you waste turns, and if they hit Vince, you'll have to do your own healing, putting you more at risk. But as usual, take down the healer first, everything becomes easier. After the fight though, something interesting occurs. These guys pull a classic loosen the fight, but keep going in the cutscene, acting like they have more juice in the system. Until they see Hero's left hand, the mark of the Luminary, they stop, dead in their tracks, and are promptly knocked out. And thus the Invincibles win the MMA. But of course, something has to go wrong. And this time, Vince decides to have a heart attack and die on stage. Nah, he'll be alright, but the awards have been postponed. That night, somebody else decides to barge in on 11's sleep. Poor guys, can't catch a break. Anyways, Rab sought out our traveling party because Jade vanished, and we looked capable enough to help. Heading over to the orphanage reveals that Vince Vanquished himself is also missing. Now that is cause for alarm. And going to the courtyard reveals a ginormous hole in the wall that certainly was not there before. As the party heads inside, I can finally end this insanely long section. Jeez Louise. Welcome to dungeon number 4. More proof that Octagonians cannot name locations. And man, this place feels like a real dungeon. While it follows a mostly linear path, it has tons of detours you can take for loot or extra fights or both. The caves look and feel like, well, caves. The area is dark, being lit only by rare torches, and is filled to the brim with giant spider webs everywhere. Wonder if that's to do with anything. There's also a really nice variety of monsters down here, mostly consisting of things you expect. Zombies, skeletons, magic bats, trolls, robotic chickens, that's kind of weird. And who could forget? Rab's also here, and with more or less the same spells he had when fighting against him. Now, get this. At the end of the cave full of spider webs, there's a giant spider boss waiting for us. What? No way, I've never seen that one before. This monstrosity is accompanied by none other than Vince Vanquish himself. Oh, and Jade, I guess. But she herself got captured to motivate the party with Rab. Immoral, maybe, but certainly effective. Anyways, it's time for some explaining. Basically, this 8-legged freak is the last of a group of monsters Sir Hendrik slayed many years ago to clear space for Octagonia. She survived by feeding off the essence of strong fires, but didn't have a good way to go out and get them for fairly obvious reasons. Enter Vince. The muscly moron stumbled across the den and gave his dude sacrifices in exchange for steroid juice. So that's the big takeaway. Vince wasn't drinking G Fuel, he's been chugging Monster. And much like Monster, it's been dissolving all of his important organs. All of that's explained the most annoying way ever, by the way. This spider takes so damn long to say any sentence. I end up skipping most of her lines. Like seriously, just watch this one sentence.
So, yes. She's perfect. Just perfect. A warrior maiden of great skill. I smell it on her skin.
Anyways, Vince dies again, and the spider finally shuts up and attacks us. I don't like Octagon very much. He's a tough boss that hits a lot and specializes in status effects, poison, webbing, and most of all, confusion. Any chance this guy gets, he's casting Kerfuddle, which will always hit at least 2 party members. Oh, and let's not forget he can get pepped up. That's not cool. Not the hardest fight ever though. The attacks don't do that much damage, and Rab is the MVP here. Damaging spells, mid-heal, and oh thank god, Defuddle, the ultimate counter his favorite move. He puts up a good fight, but falls eventually, meaning that 11 accomplished something that even Sir Hendrik couldn't. Now, there's some unfinished business in this town. First and foremost, Vince. He's not the brightest, but he really did mean well, and always puts the orphanage first. Rab agrees to let him off the hook, and gets the mayor to fund the orphanage. Up next, the awards ceremony. But while in the arena, Vince decides to give the people a final show. A duel between him and 11, winner takes all. This time he's going in raw. No monster energy, and it shows. He literally cannot hit Hero. And on our side, yeah, Mercy is not what 11 had in mind. even if he's not the strongest fighter anymore, he's still the town's hero. They love him, they love seeing what he does, and they believe in him. And now, finally, the MacGuffin hunt can end. We won the rainbow, so now our quest is to go across the... You've got to be kidding me. Rab struck again, taking the rainbow and heading southwest to Dundrasil. He also took the orb, I guess, but nobody mentions that. I mean, he did earn it, but... And as our heroes set out, yet again, in search of the same thing we've been looking for forever now, I can finally look at Octagonia as a whole. This town is weird. For one thing, the quest here is crazy long. It's the only one I had to split into 2 separate video recordings, and I wrote God knows how much about it. That said, I think it really justifies the time, simply because the MMA is a great break from the monster slaying we're used to. Fighting humans with wacky masks and funny names for funsies is a nice break from the wild goose chase we just finished and the lore dump we're about to get. The dungeon's fun, the characters, especially Vince, are enjoyable, and the whole town's design is really unique. My main gripe here is that it really does feel like side content. The whole thing could have been cut from the story and have to change like 2 lines to make everything fit. That's what's separating it from the Juggernauts and 8 here, but Tough B isn't bad at all. This would normally be where I take a break from the story, talk about some other weird thing in this game at length, but I kinda just want to finish up the Rainbow quest now. I've been looking forward to this scene for a while, so I want to just jump right in. Don't worry, after Dundrasil I'll have plenty of weird things to discuss. First things first, the path to Dundrasil is pretty interesting, because there's this huge side area with basically nothing actually in it. It looks really pretty, so I don't mind, but seriously, it's just full of chests we can't reach yet another beam out. And on the subject of pretty areas, the ruins of Dundrasil is one of the best looking areas in the whole game. It's got the same waterfalls and grasses that in between area before Octagonia, but with the remains of houses, towers, and a castle strewn about covered in moss. For being nothing more than a bunch of debris, there's a lot of stuff in the late Dundrasil. There's some amount of loot in all the houses, and there's a lot of really fun enemies to fight, especially these golems. Oh, and of course... It's also this way that Serena learns a certain funny spell you're familiar with if you've played Smash Bros. Whack. It doesn't hit very often, but when it does, boy does it feel satisfying. Supposedly it has a 50% chance to work for a healer with 0 magical might, but it feels way less likely. After messing around the town, Rab will be waiting up in the castle. The party takes a moment just taking the awe of what the greatest kingdom in Erdria has become. This is where Eleven was born, and where his parents were slain, so it makes sense he'd eventually make it back here. There's a bit of the castle courtyard to explore, where you can finally fight a standard dragon enemy. For a game called Dragon Quest, there should have been very few of these guys. It's also this random slime who tells us how wells work. I don't really know why he's here, but it's always nice to see a slime NPC. Heading through the well takes us to the castle itself, with a certain Scott waiting for us. He tells us he stole the rainbow because he knew Eleven was the luminary, and that he needed to talk to him because of that. Eventually, he takes the party to a lone grave, where he explains everything. This is the gravestone of Erwin and Eleanor, the late king and queen of Dundrasil, Eleven's parents, and the daughter and son-in-law of Rab, meaning he's the luminary's grandfather. After the destruction of Dundrasil, he survived, and figured there must have been some reason for it. Thus, he set out across the world, looking into what destroyed the kingdom and why, and imagining the old guy's surprise when he found his long-lost grandson in a fighting tournament of all things. While everyone has a moment of respect for the fallen, Rab tells us what he's discovered in his travels. Carnelian, the king of Heliodor, isn't what he used to be. He is once the most avid believer in the Luminary, trusting that he would come when the world needed him most to set things right. He could not be any further now, as we've seen. Rab thinks that his change and Dundrasil's fall are connected somehow, which is why he's currently investigating. Rab invites Eleven to help with an old ritual to send the souls of the fallen to a better place, a Dundrasilian tradition to be performed by the remaining members of the royal family. After he leaves, there's a little area tucked away with a recipe book for Dracilian armor, which I would highly recommend. Not for the stats, but because it's a visible armor set for a hero that pays respect to his birthplace while looking amazing. After heading up the hill and admiring the view, the party find Jade at the altar, getting everything set up. The ritual itself is simply beautiful. It's a way for those who were slain by monsters to find their way back to the World Tree, and in this case, serves as a proper farewell to all those lost to the tragedy of Dundrasil. The visuals are breathtaking, with each soul represented by a butterfly weaving together a path to Yggdrasil, and it's accompanied by this amazing track play on the flute that complements the scene so well. I'm not one to cry often, I mean it, but this scene is just fantastic. I don't know what else I can add on to it, it's just a perfect emotional culmination of your journey so far. After the ceremony concludes, Heroes tile in the attributes page has changed to Prince of Dundrasil. Again, I love just how much effort they poured into this one little part of the game. Heading down the hill, we come across Jade, who wants to take a walk. She had very close connections with Queen Eleanor, and saw her as a mother figure, so the ceremony really hit her hard. But then, out of nowhere, the duo spot a group of soldiers looking around, and it's not hard to figure out where they came from. The two try to head up the hill, which fails pretty fast, and they end up cornered. One of them decides to call for the leader, and who else would be leading a search party of this caliber than the almighty Sir Hendrik? A fight breaks out, where 11 is getting schooled by Hendrik, and finds himself back down on a cliff. Jade manages to draw his attention, upon which he immediately recognizes her. While that's going on, 11 starts tumbling down into the waters below. Jade immediately bolts over, with Hendrik not even trying to stop her, and saves Hero once again. Some time passes, and we awaken in a log cabin, alone. Jade quickly appears with some firewood, and the two have a conversation about everything. Jade reveals that she is the princess of Heliodor, who was thought to have been killed in the fall of Dundrasil. This was not so subtly hinted at in the last few scenes, but it's nice to have some confirmation. She feels immense regret for what happened to the Luminary that day, as she was tasked with protecting him but ultimately failed. Both fell in the river, and while 11 drifted off to Cobblestone, she was fished out by Rab. Her father started spreading rumors about how she was killed by the Luminary, so she decided to ditch him and travel with Rab. The storm eventually clears, and the duo head out to inform the others that they aren't dead. Oh, also, you remember all that time ago when I was talking about how great the overworld song is at setting the mood for adventuring? Well, here we are. We just had a great lore dumping character moment, and it's completely quiet. We just out the door and I love this scene. Before long, the royal duo are met by Hendrik, again. While he respects the lost princess and is glad for her safety, he also has orders from the king to kill the Darkspawn and all associated, so we settle things in combat. Or rather, Jade does. The whole thing is a cutscene of Heliodorians fighting, where Hendrik can't land the finishing blow because of his memories of the princess, leading to Jade stealing his horse and getting away. Hendrik's loyalty to the king seems to falter for just long enough. And it's interesting to see his approach to things almost immediately after his partners. They're going for the same goal, just in very, very different ways. Meeting up with the team, Rab welcomes us back and immediately starts expositing. He learned of an evil being named
Mordegan,
a dark one from times long, long past, who Rab is convinced is the mastermind behind all the evil today. And as the Luminary, it's our life's purpose to defeat a dark one such as him. As for how, well, the World Tree. Yggdrasil supposedly has a way of fighting the darkness, so now our main goal is getting up there. And finally, after so long, we get the Rainbow. Our MacGuffin quest is concluded after all these years. It doesn't actually do anything yet, but at least you don't have to run around looking for the damn thing, huh? Anyways, Rab and Jade finally join the party, and we set off once again, only to be promptly stopped by the Rainbow actually doing something. Guess it just had a warm up. It reveals a vision of a Smash Bros stage with 6 orbs, granting a path up to Yggdrasil. So, our great MacGuffin revealed to us that you need to track down 6 other MacGuffins. Wow, do I love JRPGs sometimes.
Maybe trekking halfway around the world to find that branch wasn't such a waste of time after all.
Erik, I will snap your neck like a toothpick. Luckily, we already have 2 of these things, one for the Kingsbarrow and one for the MMA. And so, with a new goal to work towards, the party ventures forth once more. And now we can finally talk about something other than the plot. Well, shortly. Gotta rank this segment first, and it's an easy S tier. It doesn't have anything in the way of combat or dungeons, but it more than made up for it with its world building, characters, and of course, emotional moments. Nothing more to say, I'm just so tired of talking about story. Although 2 new people just joined the party, I gotta put off discussing them for now, because it is the perfect time to discuss something I've been wanting to look at for a long while. That thing being the Skybox. Alright, hear me out. One of my favorite tropes in games is having some massive object that's always hanging out somewhere in the world, while being so noticeable that you can turn your camera from almost anywhere and see them. Think of the Citadel from Half-Life 2, the Erd Tree from Elden Ring, or Celestia from Genshin Impact. While they may seem like fun bits of visual flair, there's a lot these can do. Simply by always being present, they best serve as a reminder of something. They could be a reminder of hope in dark times, as a goal to keep pushing on to. Or on the flip side, they could serve as an ever-present threat. A reminder that you're not quite safe in this world, and there's always some greater power keeping things as they should not be. Dragon Quest XI is no stranger to putting large objects in the sky, having not 1, but 2 of them. While Yggdrasil is the most noticeable one, let's first look at Erdwin's lantern. The lantern is a bright red star that's visible even in the middle of the day. According to legend, it's where the original Luminary went after defeating the evil in the world, so you can watch over Erdrea. It's not too hard to discern what it represents then. The original Luminary watching over your progress. Though most people may think the Luminary is the source of all evil in the world, Erdwin's lantern is proof that it's not, and it's meant to serve as a little spark of hope. I've also heard it mentioned that the lantern will gradually grow brighter throughout Act 1, but I couldn't find proof of this. That doesn't mean it's not true, and it just serves its purpose even better if it is. Plus, it just sounds really awesome. As nice as the red star is, it really can't hold a candle to the other great sky object. Making Yggdrasil always visible in the overworld is ingenious. Since your main goal in Act 1 is reaching the world tree, having the ability to always look up and see how close you are to it makes it feel like you're making real progress. And the devs fully knew this, which is why the door departure sends you all the way to this corner, the single furthest point on the map from Yggdrasil. This southern stretch of land is the only place you can't see the Tree of Life, and it's also here you meet the twins and their goal to guide you to the World Tree. While that quest takes the backseat for a while, it's still a goal you have, and so you'll eventually start noticing the giant tree in the sky, especially so as you get closer to it. It is a fantastic way to track your progress. Now getting to Yggdrasil as the main quest again is something that's actually worth paying attention to. This is also another reason why I hate 2D mode so much. When locked to the top-down perspective it has, you lose the ability to look up, and as such, lose the power to track your progress with, or just admire the view of Yggdrasil. That stupid will lose out on so many of the little things that make you love this game so much, and this is one of the biggest ones. Neither of the floating objects are actually integral to the game, but I think the additions are some of my favorite parts of the game. They represent so much, and serve as motivation for you to keep going, despite doing nothing but just sitting around in the sky. And this will become much more important in Act 2, so for now, just remember the significance and meaning of both Yggdrasil and Erdwin's lantern, the beacons of hope in the world. And don't worry, this will be quick. Next stop in our hero's journey is the seaside city of Puerto Valor. This is the town that controls the gate to the greater ocean, and we need to go in and get them to open it up. You need to actually be in the city for about 5 minutes, no exaggeration. Run in to talk to the big man, find out he's out of town, talk to his creepily named servant instead, and leave. It's one of the few locations you visit in Act 1 that doesn't have any major conflict in the act, instead coming into relevance much later. But just because there aren't any story events happening here doesn't mean there's nothing to talk about, far from it. First off, the boss from the third dungeon now shows up as a regular enemy. It's not like Jarvis or the Tricky Devil where it's a similar enemy but with a different color scheme and name. No, it's literally the same guy. What a stupid boss. Secondly, this is where I rediscovered camera mode. It lets you take photos and goof around with the camera. I didn't make much use of it in Act 1, but it's the easiest way to see characters' dancing animations because everybody has their own unique one and they're all super fun to see. And finally, Puerto Valor introduces 2 new features. It's the first mini metal tracker you'll find. I'll talk about these more briefly, but it's nice to deposit them somewhere. But, more importantly, gambling. Casinos are a staple of the Dragon Quest franchise, going all the way back to number 4, with gambling existing in some sense since Dragon Quest II. It's such an iconic feature that built Heroes Smash moveset around gambling. Now you may be thinking it's like Luigi's Casino in the DS Marios, where it's a fun side mode that has no actual effects on the real game, but no. You buy casino tokens with the in-game money, at a pretty ludicrous conversion might I add, and then lose them all because you end up broke. You can spend the tokens on prizes, but yeah, good freaking luck getting some of those things. The game actually gives you some really solid motivation to try your hand though. There is this absurd NPC in town who is absolutely thirsting for bunny girls, calling himself their biggest fan in all Erdria. He locks onto the curviest member of the party, Jade, and will give you a reward for dressing her up in a bunny girl outfit in a side quest called... I'm sorry, what now? Anyways, the cheapest reward in the casino is a recipe book to complete this, interesting quest. The twins get these nice little polka dot outfits in the town, they look cute and switch their colors, and Jade gets this. Nice to see the game is taking full advantage of our new party member. Now, the games themselves. Puerto Valor isn't the biggest casino in the game, and it doesn't have everything, but there's still plenty of ways to get your token count up, and by plenty, I mean 3, I think. I only recorded 1, so I truthfully don't remember. Anyways, first up is slots. It's slots. It's definitely my favorite of the 3, but I thought it was only at the next casino, so I didn't actually do anything with it. There's another machine with a game called Slime Quest that I hate more than I can put into words. Nothing about it makes sense, and just eats up all your tokens like nothing else. So that leaves poker. I love poker in real life and in this game. It's pretty standard 5-card draw, but with 2 catches. First off, jokers are included as wild cards, and secondly, the greatest addition to any game ever, double or nothing. It's simple. If you win poker, you can try your hand in the bonus game. You're given a card and have to select a face-down card that you think is higher. You can play again if you win, so you can theoretically earn a stupid amount of money from Double or Nothing alone. And boy is this game addictive. It is awesome to see just how much your winning can snowball after a few successes, and much like a real casino, it is tempting to see just how far you can push your luck. By the way, always go number 2. It never fails, except when it does. The casino is a great time sink if you just want to mess around the game. It's just like a real casino, except it doesn't cost any money and smells 100 times better. Also, the mascots of the casinos in this series are bunny girls. In case you haven't figured out, this franchise has some really weird obsession with bunny girls. Oh yeah, speaking of, Jade is looking better than ever, and this guy is freaking out like a cartoon character. Jade isn't too thrilled, but I assure you, it is an item of utmost value that's totally worth the sacrifice. Oh yeah, Sylvando didn't come to town with everyone. He didn't say why. Yeah, I figured I should probably mention that. Back on the ocean, the boat passes through the gate with everyone waving except Sylvando, who tries to hide behind Erik and fails miserably. You know, most boats have these things called insides. Cervantes seems to recognize him, and that's the last we'll see of him or anything in the city for a long while. And finally, after seeing traversal through this, oh god damn it. After seeing traversal through this canyon, we end up in the ocean itself. But not for long. Some fog rolls in, and the party winds up on this tiny little island with the stallion stuck in some rocks. So much for ocean exploration. This small stretch of land is called the Strand. It is a weird place. As Erik points out, there's no wind, no waves, and more noticeably, no music. There's not much here, save a few shipwrecks from God knows when, and a big donut hole in the middle of the island. And that donut hole just so happens to house the only other life form on the Strand, a mermaid. This is Michelle, a mermaid who's been hanging out on the Strand, waiting for a man she loves named Kai. She always speaks in rhymes, which makes me want to die. Michelle's going to get married to Kai, but had to head to his home in Lonalulu and hasn't yet returned. She will go after him, but mentions that mermaids dissolve into foam if they return to water after venturing onto land, and she'd like to keep swimming. Veronica makes a deal with her, where if they bring Kai back, she'll take the party to the mermaid's home, Nautica, since there's been some rumors of a suspiciously orb-shaped object that's sunk to the ocean floor. And so, we got a fun detour over the southernmost point of the world. Woohoo! Now that we've started this whole quest, I'm gonna be honest about something. I really do not like Lonalulu or this quest. I'll go into it more soon, but the whole thing reeks of filler side content and is about 90% utterly useless and meaningless. I was seriously thinking of just not doing anything about this section, but there's one thing at the end stopping me. But up until then, I'll be hitting these points a bit faster than usual. Luckily, Sylvando is much more excited than I am, and so is his voice actor.
Here we are in beautiful Lonalulu, a seaside paradise that Shell tells me is home to the prettiest pals in all the world.
Have I mentioned how good the voice acting in this game is? And finally, Erik speaking my language again. The sooner we're out of here, the better. So here's the gist of it. There's a legend of a guy who got his soul stolen by a mermaid, is the whole town scared of them. And guys out at sea with some warriors fighting a big squid. Fast forward a bit, almost get crushed by a boat, and it's boss time. This is the Tentacular, also known as that squid that Donkey hates. The fight is built around the creature using its arms to defend its head from oncoming damage, and then growing the back once they fall. It's also got plenty of ways to make you waste turns, either with sleeping or being knocked over. It's a decently tough fight, but nothing unmanageable. With the beast defeated, Lonalulu holds a party to celebrate, with our traveling squad invited. It's pretty nice, with a lot of drunkards and a line of people sipping for Serena, but notably, Kai isn't there. He's out on the docks. So, Kainui here isn't actually the Kai we're looking for. His grandfather is. He fills the party in about the tale of his grandfather getting chased out for loving a mermaid, and tells 11 to meet him behind town. Saikiki Beach is the location, and much like a strand, it is devoid of music. Nothing here but the ocean, a graveyard, and hut where Kai the First lived. Kai gives us a veil his Gramps had, and asks us to pass it on to Michelle, and tell her what happened. Now would be a good time to mention how bad Kai's voice actor is. I'm sure he's a talented dude, but his performance here tries to go for some weird pseudo-American accent, which makes him sound constantly tired and disinterested. It's really annoying.
After Grandpa died, they let her go back to the village and marry a local guy. But it didn't stop folks talking.
Thankfully, you can zoom to the strand, so you don't have to deal with random encounters. And hey, there's even music now. Weirdly, the scene of 11 killing Michelle, her fiancé, is dead isn't voice acted. I have no clue why. Every other scene this quest has been, and this was pretty damn important. Maybe the voice actor just got sick that day or something? I don't know. Either way, Michelle says she'll follow us back to Lonalulu to see the situation for herself. Thankfully, there's a fade to black to save us from random encounters, and we're back in Hawaii. Heading back to the beach, you get Michelle and Kai the Second to meet. Kai clears up everything and motions to a gravestone separated from the others, where his grandfather lays. Upon seeing the grave and fully grasping the situation, Michelle dons the veil, which transforms her tail into a pair of legs as she struggles up onto the shore to visit the grave. She takes one last vow to her late beloved, and after some reminiscing about what could have been, steps back into the water, ending her life by dissolving into foam. Kai remembers something, rushes to her cabin, and reveals a beautiful painting of Michelle his grandfather made. Attaches a letter from Kai the First, addressed to Michelle. He laments that he'll never be able to return. He had saved a child and had to look after her. He never stopped loving Michelle and wanted nothing more than to return her, but his obligations and responsibilities held him back. Kai II apologizes for being so hard on us, and having learned the truth of the mermaid's curse, finally accepts his grandfather and respects the choices he made. Heading back to the strand reveals a chest where Michelle sat, which contains a harp that grants access to the submerged city of Nautica, as well as a note from Michelle that reveals that she even writes in rhyme. The music's gone again, by the way, and with new undersea utopias to explore, the party ventures forth once more, and I can finish up with this stupid town already. As stated earlier, I really don't like the Lonalulu section, as for one simple reason. It feels entirely useless. The whole area reeks of side content, since there's almost nothing here that actually comes back later, and it's so far away from every other part of the quest geographically that feels like a last minute addition. While the setting itself is alright, the characters aren't really all too interesting. I don't like the two lead voices very much. One of them is kinda grating, and the other guy doesn't feel like he's even trying. The entire quest is absolutely carried by that ending scene. While it's not as impactful as the Dundrasil ceremony, it is one of the emotional high points of Act 1, and it really lands. It's a shame the build-up to it isn't fantastic, and again, it just feels so useless. If the fog just somehow took us to Nautica directly, nothing would be lost, and the game would flow a lot better actually. Lonalulu lands at the top of D tier. It manages to escape the bottom with its amazing conclusion, but don't worry, that tier is about to get some more company. Nautica is actually going to this big old pillar of light in the ocean and then dropping down. The town is in some fierce competition with Puerto Valor for being the city you spend the least time in during Act 1. Being underwater, you have an improved jump, which doesn't actually do anything, but it's fun to mess around with. The city is full of mer people, who have the classic tropes some species have, where the girls look like pretty human ladies with one slight difference, and the men look like this. However, mermen aren't forced to speak in rhyme, so they probably got the better half of the deal. There's also this random shark who lives in the town and runs the shop, but Hero doesn't speak shark, so you can't actually talk to him. I love this guy. At the top of the hill, you can find Queen Marina waiting in your castle. She has a magical Queen E sight that lets her see pretty much everything, which saves a bunch of explaining. And she cuts right to the chase and gives us the green orb. This scene is also the intro cinematic of the game for some reason. Kind of a weird addition, but it looks cool, so I don't mind. She then talks about the mermaid's curse a bit, tells us to go to Yggdrasil, and yeah, then we're off. Totally we didn't spend much time here. Now that we've sorted out that whole dilemma, we can finally explore the Great Blue Sea without being stopped by anything. Okay, aside from those. Thanks a lot, Pepe. I mean, he actually did all this before Lonalulu, but to keep a good flow, I put it off for a bit. The ocean is more or less just a large version of the bay we had at start, which I guess makes sense. Difference is, there are way more interesting things out here, most notably the islands. They're scattered about and have more interesting things on them, but there's two I really want to look at. The first is found in the southwest corner of the world, Insula Incognita. The island is rocky and dry, with nothing but crisp trees and grass for vegetation. There's a geoglyph inscribed on the ground, which I thought was some foreshadowing for something coming up, but as it turns out, it's just some big bird that the devs thought looked cool. The most interesting part of this island comes from its native enemies. It's full of club wielders, hammer hoods we fought at level 3-ish for some reason, along with their upgrades and trolls. But most notably, on the highest point of the island, you can find the game's first Cyclopses. I love these guys so much. They're like full mini-bosses just wander around the map, and they are great fights. They hit just hard enough and have just enough health to be a perfect challenge for a party at this point. And aesthetically, these might have my favorite design in the game. It's got the mix of somewhat threatening but still cartoony and kind of friendly the Dragon Quest monster designs are famous for. Plus, their animations are awesome. I could watch those all day. This island was kind of just an excuse to talk about Cyclopses, but I think that's alright. It's also at this island where I discover what happens if you use party talk when someone's dead. The result is, well, it's pretty damn funny, that's what it is. Oh, poor Sylvando. The other notable island, though, is much more interesting. On the complete other side of the world, the single furthest point from anything else, requiring you to sail halfway around Erdria from either direction, is a small island known as Insula Orientalis. It doesn't take long to catch on the gimmick of this place. Welcome to Slime Town. Every creature here is some variant of slime, ranging from the very first standard slimes all the way up to the new King Slime. There isn't much challenge on the island, with even King Slimes going on pretty easy, but it's such a bizarre and memorable location they had to mention it. It's one of the parts of the game that really stuck with me the most. Not to mention, it is a great place to farm metal slimes. They aren't as useful now as the XP gap has closed a bit, but they're far from a bad way to get some free levels. there's one final thing about the ocean. It came from a weird thought I had. I wanted to see what happened if you just kept sailing in one direction. I figured it'd just tell me to turn around at some point, but boy was I surprised. Leaving Eerie will quickly envelop the world in fog, so you'll be relying on the minimap to keep going straight. You'll encounter a fair few random encounters out here, but after about a minute of sailing, you'll find yourself on the other side of the map. I wish I had recorded my reaction to this, because I was floored by it. I guess it makes sense and all, but I didn't think the devs would actually go through all the effort of adding this small detail for lunatics like me. It's things like this just make this game, man. Our next stop is a stretch known as the Champ Sauvage. The area is pretty unnotable, save these metal slime knights that don't function like metal slimes at all. Canonically, the slime knights just painted their mounts chrome, which is so stupid but so good. There are 3 exits to the Sauvage. Going south takes us to Phnom Nomh, the next step in our journey, so let's head north first. Ignoring the Eerie Eyrie for now, the only place to go is Le Camille de Notre Maître des Médlis. I totally mispronounced it, but look at this thing. As the name suggests, the place is aggressively French. The Academy, as I'll be calling it, is where you deposit all the mini medals you've collected on your journey. These things are little trinkets you find in barrels, chests, and other bizarre locations, and are often given out as rewards for exploring nooks and crannies. You can exchange them here for prizes, and pretty damn good prizes at that. I'm actually related that Puerto Valor also has one of these, but it's gotta be the main destination you drop them off at. There's also an entire building here too. The Academy is like a pseudo-town. It has music, it has quests, but I think that's not the main point in any act, and is always relegated to side content. So exploring around, you can find some girls attending there and do a bunch of side quests for them, but that's about it. There is one really weird thing here though. Next to the principal's office, there's an Yggdrasil route where you can watch back any cutscene in the game. It's cool it's here and all, but like, why here? Of all the locations in Eerie to put this thing, it seems like it'd be better suited for Heliodor or Arboria or actually even Tickington. It's just whack, man. The road to Phnom Nomh is filled with ruins and swamps. There are some pretty standard enemies here, except for this one guy. I haven't talked about them yet, but some monsters have rare variants, so are their shiny equivalents. And this Berlimpian is the first one that I encountered, aside from one in Tickington, but let's not count Tickington, alright? Revenants are stronger, much tougher, and way more versatile than their standard counterparts. I like this funny umbrella has the ability to cast Thwack. Didn't see that coming. They're tough, but very rewarding to kill, always dropping a bunch of XP and a rare item. Anyways, as much as I don't want to, we should probably head into the town itself now. Welcome to Phnom Nomh, which is another solid contender for my least favorite town, just for a different reason than Lonalulu. The town is found on tourist traps and sightseeing, most prominently being the ruins of Now What. Rab suggests we take a ganderino at those ruins, and we split up to explore town. After heading through the city and meeting at least a dozen people trying to sell you things, you'll find Sylvando at the top of the hill talking to a young girl. This is Dora, a lass who lost her parents in the ruins, and Sylvando, being the do-gooder that he is, vows to help find them, and naturally recruits 11 to help. And so, Sylv's detective agency is on the case. The ruins are filled with crazy people who simp over 1,000-year-old paintings and unironically say Bonzer. While there, you'll overhear a rumor of people disappearing in the ruins, but that couldn't possibly be true. There's also a scholar who mentioned these are the last ruins of a fallen kingdom, but more on that later. At the bureau, you encounter Erik and his sisters, who are kind of impressed by it, but that's about it. Though they do notice some weird things about it, a crack and a key. While the party starts arguing over nothing, the key begins to glow, until a bunch of brainlets enter the room and shove everyone aside. Since the town is built upon tourist traps and get-rich-quick schemes, and filled with a bunch of rude people who think of nothing but themselves, I've used my skills as part of Sylvando's detective agency to determine that Phnom Nomh is based on New York. It only makes sense. The party reunites with Sylvando, and confirms that nobody found anything, so we gotta head back to Dora. This means we gotta do some pretty pointless backtracking up this cliff, and then all the way through the town because she is gone. It's not too bad, but remember this. It'll be a recurring theme in this part of the game. Anyways, we come across this slimy guy who's literally named Monty. His wife knows all about everyone who comes in and out of the village, and he'll lend us her help if we spend the night at his stupid inn. His wife doesn't actually know anything though, and he's letting us stay for free, so I have zero clue what this guy's actual motivation is, aside from attempted murder. But his wife does mention in the morning that Baza, the guy from the mural, never returned, so at least it wasn't for nothing. On the road back to the mural, Dora appears, hits Hero with the... and leaves. Yeah, taste your own medicine, huh, pal? Upon going back to the mural, the party find Baza alright, but he's put a link between worlds and gone jammed in a wall. As soon as Veronica realizes that, the door slams shut and the mural sucks the group within. Welcome to the other side, the pre-dungeon. It's mystical, blue, and filled with zombies. At the end of the corridor, you'll find Baza and his pals kneeling in front of the mural, which starts telepathically talking. It disses us for a bit, makes some cool note about the luminary, and then pieces out. Pretty standard stuff at this point. Now there's some more pre-dungeon with enemies of actual note. A huge mimic that can cast whack, and even huger four-handed giants, the first demons in the game, complete with crotch armor. This is actually really nice, because both the sisters have abilities specifically designed to take down demons, and it feels really cool to actually be able to use them after just kind of sitting around them the whole game. Also, yeah, go back to the mimic for a sec. When this thing lands a crit, good god, does it get huge. Anyways, these guys get eaten by a big tentacle. After stopping to read a stone slate, the party managed to skedaddle away through a crack in space-time. After running through the town, again, the party encounters Dora again, who's basically the ruler of Mural Land, and tells her to cut out. It goes about as well as you'd think. She does mention she's getting power from the greatest of all beings before piecing out, piquing Rab's attention. She tells us to square up and fight her in the mural, meaning you have to walk through the city and ruins again, in addition to another walk through the pre-dungeon, which you did not even 10 minutes ago. I hope you're starting to see why I don't like this town. The Cursed Cloisters are the 5th dungeon in the game, and boy are they a dungeon. You know, I criticized the found place for being a bit simple in its layout with not too many detours and goodies. But I think I may have been a bit harsh. Just look at the damn map for this thing. This dungeon is massive. Just a glance at the map already makes it look big, but there are 3 floors to this place. With how many times you switch floors, it can be really hard to navigate. I got lost a few times the first time through, and even once or twice this time. But once you figure it out, the whole dungeon is just a straight line with some paths that consist of 1 or 2 platforms, which is a kind of lame design. With how the dungeon looks, it seems like there should be multiple paths that lead up to the boss, each with different enemies and goodies. It makes the dungeon a lot more interesting with its actual design. It even cut out a lot of the backtracking of head down this path, then back up it. Enemy-wise, the dungeon is nothing we haven't seen before. Bunch of enemies from the pre-dungeon and some recolors. Well, with one gooey exception, of course. Even the mount is just the same one from the second dungeon, just without anything to climb. Since there isn't anything else to talk about this time, I want to briefly touch on how powerful certain party members are now. Veronica can one-shot most of the weaker enemies with a single boom, which renders any swarm fight over before it starts. But more notably, Erik has gotten crazy at this point, thanks to a certain combo in daggers, Sleeper Hit and Persecutor. Sleeper Hit is exactly what you think it'd be. It puts someone to sleep, big whoop. But Persecutor is a funny little attack meant to follow up on that. It does extra damage to sleeping foes, and I mean a lot of extra damage. You're probably thinking, oh yeah, for that simple combo it would probably be like 2 or 3 times damage, that'd be a lot. And yeah, it would. But try 6 times the damage. Like, it's unfair the amount of damage you can do with this move. Now, this is balanced out by forcing enemies to be sleeping. Since it's a full turn waster, most bosses and stronger enemies are immune to sleep, or otherwise recover from it before you can follow up. So that's why he also does Cobra Strike and Victimizer, the same combo with a much easier to land poison. Now, if you thought that was crazy, there's more. Erik learns a unique ability called Divide, where he creates 2 duplicates of himself that mimic his attacks for the next turn. Thing is, they do more or less the same damage as Erik himself. So if you can get an enemy to sleep for 2 turns, and maybe get an oomph off, Erik can do what can generously be called a fucking insane amount of damage. I haven't even gotten into his ability to dual wield knives. Those don't get the 6 times multiplier, so it's not that much more damage. They still get the 3 times benefit from Divide. But yeah, Erik's a pretty good guy to keep with the party. All those skills are exclusive to knives. If you're running boomerangs on him, he's still insane just for different reasons. More crowd control, less single burst. After wandering up and down and all around the dungeon, you'll find a lone goddess statue. This will let you save before the boss and regain HP and MP. But like, who built this thing here? Whatever, it doesn't matter. Dora's waiting for us, she disses us some blah blah blah. It's boss time. Dora in Grey is, first off, the best name for a boss ever conceived. Anyways, this fight is a real doozy. Like every other boss recently, she hits hard and makes you waste turns. But unlike other bosses, she has the ability to critically flick, sap health from her team, lock you out abilities, shoot lasers from her eyes, and her turn waster makes the affected individual attack teammates. It ends up making the fight take a while, as your healers will need to be constantly healing, and most of your physical damage dealers can, and probably will, get their abilities sealed off, losing out on their powerful options. Seriously, 11 was enthralled twice, and had his abilities sealed off for like 7 turns, so he was utterly useless the entire fight, but I wanted him there for a crazy pet power. By the time I was able to do it, the fight was basically already over, so I just decided to wrap it up. As she's dying, she reveals she was working under Mortigan. Big twist. Jade says she has to say more than that, but like, she doesn't, so she doesn't. Dora drops the magic key, a nifty thing used to open silver doors that lay scattered across the world. Upon leaving the mural, everyone who was captured is already lying on the floor, and the mural itself has vanished. Monty somehow believes the story of the other side, and lets us stay as in for free again. And hey, the game auto warps us over this time, thank God. Phnom Nomh ain't too phased where they lost their main attraction, so we can finally roam free again with no press charges. And the first place to go is over in Zwaardsrust. One of the weird underground doors can be opened with the magic key, and the purple orb is just kinda in there with some other junk. And with another orb in hand, the party ventures forth to God knows where, to find the other two in random sacks of junk. So, Phnom Nomh. I really don't like it. The town is massively uninteresting, and like Lonalulu, feels like side content. I think my main gripe is the lack of relevant side characters. Most other towns had at least some important residents to help us out, with a quest all about helping them overcome their problem. And like, I guess Phnom Nomh has Baza or maybe Mani, but they feel completely irrelevant to the main conflict of the segment. But more than that, I loathe all the backtracking this game makes you do. You have to walk back and forth through the town like 4 times and the pre-dungeon twice. Is there any reason for this? Yeah, it wastes your time. There is one really cool thing about the town though, and that's the ruins. Now what is said to be the ruins of a kingdom long destroyed by forces of evil. And back in Dundrasil, Rab mentions the kingdom was once decimated by Morrigan under his reign. Once you find both those tidbits, the game actually gives you a good amount of time to connect the dots for yourself, before Rab eventually comes and just spells it out. It's pretty cool to actually visit an area with this much history. I just wish it wasn't tied to one of the worst towns in the game. Phnom Nomh ends up in the top of F tier, for having no interesting characters, a ton of backtracking, and a simple yet stupidly complicated dungeon that doesn't offer anything new. Now, this would normally be when I start talking about something unrelated to the story, but I want to just knock out this weird place real fast. On the other side of the Champ Sauvage, east of the French place, lies the game's 6th dungeon, the Eerie Eyrie. Yeah, it's not connected to any story bit or even any town, it's just randomly over there for some reason. The dungeon's about as notable as something over here would be. We fight some enemies, Erik steals some stuff, the Robo Eggman from the Kingsbarrow is back, nothing unusual. Though this dungeon has multiple split paths and alternate routes, giving the player a lot of freedom in how they want to tackle it. So the devs weren't against this idea, making it all the weird that the last dungeon didn't have any of these. The bosses are a bunch of random birds who have a touch more presence than the boss of the fountain, since they have a whole 1 line of dialogue. They go down with 0 problems. And lo and behold, the silver orb. These things just keep getting less important, huh? Seriously, the first one was a whole quest. It was important to Erik, giving him motivation to help 11. The second one was kind of tied to the rainbow at the end. The third was attached to a glorified side quest. The fourth is in a cool door of a previously visited area, and now this one's just here. They keep adding them in increasingly tacky ways. It's really weird. Anyways, I'm not gonna rank the dungeon. It has no relevance or story and doesn't fit on the list. I will point out the amazing view of Yggdrasil at the top of the Eyrie though. We can finally see some of the finer details of the world tree. And it really shows just how close we are to finishing our quest. And, more importantly, it just looks gorgeous. Alright, now that there's some downtime, I really have put off talking about the newest party members for far too long. And unlike the twins, these two play entirely different from one another, so I'll look at them individually. First off, the Princess of Heliodor, Jade. This would ordinarily be where I put a recruitment line and show a bunch of footage of her being all cool, but she joins with Rab, who has all the dialogue in that scene, so, sorry Jade. Jade is the most unique member of the party for one reason. She has no spells. I mean this time, she never at any point learns a single spell. 100% of her damage comes from her attack and her abilities, and luckily she delivers. Jade solidly fills us all with physical damage, as she is one of the strongest damage dealers in the game. For starters, she has access to 2 weapons, spears, shared with Serena, and claws, shared with Rab. Claws are double attacking weapons with stupidly high crit rates, and spears just hit really, really hard, and have a ton of wacky skills. I went with claws the first time around, and spears on this run. The biggest weakness of these weapons is their lack of multi-targeting. Spears get a small handful of skills that can hit a group, and claws get nothing. Luckily, Jade does have more things to learn, in her fistcuffs and, allure categories. She gains access to a bunch of crazy attacks with legs and whatnot, most notably Leg Sweep, which has a stupid high chance to knock over ground enemies, and Harvest Moon, which does, a pretty good amount of damage to airborne foes, and of course, Allure. Being a JRPG, they had to fit it in somewhere. Jade loads a bunch of skills from this, using your body to great effect. Hip Drop, Sexy Beam, Pink Tornado, and of course, Puff Puff. All these scale of charm, which is actually great, since it is otherwise by far the most useless stat in the game. She has the highest charm in the game too, which used to be Sylvando's thing, but he can't have nice things, or any things for that matter. I do want to real quick touch on Jade's actual character, or the lack thereof. Despite a solid introduction, and what her design would have you think, Jade's a weirdly flat character. Like every other character, save the obvious, is simply brimming with personality. They have so much care put into every line they say, from main story stuff to when they get hit by a status effect in battle. They all feel so defined and are so fun to interact with. Except Jade. She doesn't really have any defining character traits, and more notably, she doesn't have very much growth throughout the story. Like, I'm trying to remember what happens to every character in Act 2, which I have yet to replay. I can distinctly remember some amazing moments of growth for all of them, where they feel like they evolve and mature. Except Jade. Does she have one? Maybe? But even if she does, it apparently doesn't do all that much to make her stand out. That said, she does truly care for the Luminary, and whenever the two of them share a scene together, it's generally pretty good. You really feel the connection and obligations he has to keep him safe. But it's not enough to elevate her to be interesting, I'm afraid. A shame, truly. But I'll be keeping track of her, especially in Act 2. It is entirely possible I just forgot something really cool about her, because I am an idiot. There's only one port left to dock our boat on the mainland, and that's the frosty northern town of Sniflheim, based on real-life Iceland. But, unlike Iceland, the entire town is coated in ice, and there's a heavy fog covering the area. I love how distinct each party member's reaction to this area is. Sylvando was freaking out the sight of snow, Veronica's freezing to death, Rab's telling some story, and Erik, he's not doing very well. The rainbow immediately confirms an orb is nearby, so we're in the right area. There's a problem though. Yeah, actually several. The most pressing one is that the door is sealed shut with ice. Luckily, this is the only kingdom with a back door installed. It's sealed with a magic lock, but that's solely to prevent sequence breaking. Unluckily, everything and everyone inside the walls is covered in ice, so unless we do something about that, we're not gonna get very far. There's one person who managed to escape this great freeze, and what are the odds? It's the Queen Frizabel. She explains that a witch strolled into town a few months back and froze the place in an instant. Serena acts really surprised by this, like we weren't just inside a 1,000-year-old mural. Anyways, she has the orb, but it's stuck inside the castle, and now we're forced to help unfreeze this place. The Queen enlisted the help of some foreign soldiers not too long ago, but she hasn't heard a peep from them, so it's up to the party to find them and undo the witch's curse. Believe me, I tried to worm my way out, but Veronica won't let me. This place gets 2 dungeons. Well, sorta. The Hexwood is a mini dungeon. It's not big enough to be a full-scale one, but it's too large to just skim past. The place is a snowy forest with a clearly defined path, and it's really one of the best dungeons in the game. Seriously, I don't know what it is, but I just had way more fun in this dungeon than most of the recent full-scale ones. It feels like it's the perfect length, has goodies that don't take too long to find, and has a really versatile and fun selection of enemies. Also, I remembered Zap existed at this point, and man, when I told you that Zap skill is better than any other spell, I meant it. Anyways, those soldiers that Frizabel mentioned. By now, 11 should know there's only one nation in Erdrea that can afford to send out this many soldiers. And at this point, it's its own fault for running across Heliodor again. Luckily, they seem too focused on finding their commander and not freezing to death to attack the Darkspawn. Also, would you believe me if I told you that this game, the JRPG, has the most severe ice physics I've ever seen? Because if you wouldn't, just take a look at this. After reaching the goddess statue at the end of the dungeon, things take a turn for the worse. A blizzard rolls in, and the Luminary is separated from his companions. You get to control 11 for a bit here, and while it's small, it's a detail I really like. You're alone, cold, slow, and there's not even music to keep you company. You are at your most vulnerable now, and for how brief this section of the game is, it instills a genuine feeling of helplessness in the player, amplified even more by seeing the last person you'd want to see at the end of your path. Hendrik's out in the snowfield, fighting the most frightening creature and seemingly losing. This is one of those times when I really wish the Luminary had a voice of his own, as he's presented with a choice here. Help the beast defeat the knight who's been ruthlessly hunting him down and help to burn his hometown, or assist his fellow man slaying a beast that can, and probably will, tear through the remaining Heliodorian soldiers if not dealt with. Sadly, the game makes this choice with no input from 11, and we end up in a duel with Jormungand. It's not the most difficult fight, obviously, and even decreases its own defense for you. Just have mid-heal and stand by and don't get sloppy. Hendrik finishes off the creature, and instantly turns to do the same to the Darkspawn, only to be stopped by a bunch of ice freezing both combatants to the ground. Enter Crystalinda, Resident Witch. She says she has her quest to stop him by the one who released her, who has a necklace matching Hendrik's. It doesn't take a genius to figure out who that could be, and even Hendrik knows what's up. The two are about to get frozen when Veronica deja vu's her way in to save them and give the witch a nasty burn in the process. She skedaddles off, releasing the deep freeze. Hendrik walks over to the necklace, and after making a comment about catching us later, leaves. Up until this point, Hendrik has wanted nothing more than to capture the Darkspawn. Being a direct order from the king has been his top priority the whole game. Even when it goes against his morals, he prioritizes our captures. But now, even though he has the Darkspawn right in front of him, he lets us go. For now. There's something more important to him. 11 passes out and ends up at the hut of Mr. Exposition here. Tells us the whole backstory of Crystalinda. Long story short, she was sealed in a book and put in a library. This library is right up the hill and is our next destination. On the way there, we get this thing as a mount, which breaks through everything and is pretty fun. There's a bit of back and forth getting up there, and on the way, you'll pass by this weird geoglyph. It sort of looks like a toggle, just with more arms in. Scarier. Welcome to the real dungeon of this area, and the 7th in the game, the Royal Library. And honestly, I think it may be the best one thus far. The dungeon is a single room, this gigantic cylinder, built around the mechanic of rotating the outside walls to access new paths and stairs. This mechanic lets the devs get pretty creative with the design, putting goodies in areas that need you to think about how the whole place shifts around with each rotation. It's a really fun mechanic to work with. Outside of the fundamentals, the dungeon keeps delivering. The enemy selection is great, with a whole bunch of new foes that have interesting designs and fighting techniques. Plus, we get the returns of pigs with hats, which is always positive. Oh, and of course, these guys. Aesthetically, the dungeon also scores, being a dusty old library with shelves upon shelves of books covering every wall and a huge central column. There are enemies giving lessons to each other throughout the dungeon, which is the coolest detail ever put in the game. And since it's the library, there are more than a few books that you can stop and read. And there's some good stuff here. Like this one that references shy pucks, the draconic rule you can enable at the very start of your save file. There's also a bunch of books deal with magic that you can't do anything with. Weird. Strangely, the dungeon doesn't have a boss at the end. Instead, it ends when you walk into the room in the middle. In the room, the party uncovers some info about Crystalinda, like how the people from the Age of Heroes need the help of a great beast to seal her away. I wonder what happened to that guy. After realizing how weird it is that the queen sends to kill a thing, and using a bit of logo recognition, Veronica realizes something funny must be going on with the queen. After zooming back to town and confronting Frisbel, she confirms that she's Crystalinda in disguise, and it's boss time again. Crazy as it sounds, the ice switch uses a lot of ice attacks. Luckily, Serena's Hymn of Ice can nicely dampen her damage. Aside from that, she has her own flavor of turn wasters, turning people into snowmen. I'm pretty sure it's a guaranteed hit, but it's so goofy that I don't mind it. Her main thing, though, comes in her ability to whip up snowstorms. Makes her ice attacks deal more damage, which just gets cancelled out by Hymn of Ice, but more noticeably decreases party members' hit rates. Even with all that, she's not that hard of a boss, and she should go down no problem. After the fight, the scholar who I've barely mentioned seals Crystaline in the book again, with some difficulty. The town instantly defrosts, and the book releases the queen, who takes us into the castle so we can get the orb. Oh yeah, Eric's not on party talk, and I have genuinely no clue where he actually is. In the castle, Veronica starts hearing the book talking to her, which says that the Frisbel on the throne is still the witch. So we get the scholar in here to referee and determine which Frisbel is real by asking what the treasure of Sniflheim is, with the real answer legitimately being the friends made along the way, coming from the book. So the real Frisbel is released from there. And then this is where everything starts falling apart, because it's the question of what to do with the witch. Story wants to take her to the dungeon, but Frisbel stops him because she wants to keep her around as a royal advisor. What? Okay, so there are about 5 dozen things wrong with this. Let's break it down. Frisbel wants to keep Crystaline alive because she gave her good leadership advice when she was trapped in the book. Yeah, okay. Mind saying why you were trapped in the book, you moron? Seriously, this person froze your city and impersonated you not once, but twice. And now you want to keep her around because she says she lost her powers. She impersonated you. She is known flying. She should be executed, not kept as the queen's right hand. What on earth is stopping her from just taking over power from right there? Her lost powers? Who says she's not getting them back, and who knows what she'll do with them? Hell, what about the people of the kingdom? They were frozen solid for 3 months by this evil being. Why should they let her have a position of power? It's just begging for a revolution to overthrow this brain-dead monarch. Why not give her another chance, Veronica? She is a terrorist! Why would you? She does reveal why she froze the kingdom, though. When she was freed by a certain ponytailed knight, he told her to freeze the kingdom to track Sir Hendrik and then kill him. So basically, Sniflheim was being used as bait. With that fiasco unfolding now, the most idiotic ruler in history does somehow remember to give us the blue orb, completing our collection of Dragon Balls. As the party ventures forth once again with the destination in sight, I can reflect on this weird frozen town. Sniflheim's a mixed bag. It has the best dungeon design thus far, with both the mini dungeon and the real thing knocking it out of the park. And story-wise, it has a really strong point with Sir Hendrik, but everything it built up just comes crashing down with Frisbel's moronic decision at the end. It is seriously the single worst choice that one could make in that situation. You might as well just give her the throne if you trust her that much. I was contemplating bottom tier for the region overall, since the tier list is solely based on story. But after remembering Hendrik's scene here, which got overshadowed by the worst decision ever made in my mind, I think I'll put it in bottom of D. It's so close to being great, but much like in real life, political leaders had to make terrible choices to screw up everything. The party reunites with Erik by the entrance of the city. What is he doing there? Nobody knows. Rab takes a moment to get the party pumped up for the final stretch of the journey, only to be interrupted by dropping a magazine out of his backpack, and not just any old magazine. This is evidently not the first time Rab's had one of these things around. He tries the classic, "It's not what you think," and it goes about as well as you'd expect. After this cutscene, you see the party's varied reactions to the incident. Sylvando's shaming him, Jade wants to beat the crap out of him, and Serena, oh poor Serena, too pure for this world. Going to attributes, Rab's title has also changed to Dirty Old Man. I think now is the perfect time to talk about the old guy.
Why don't Jade and I join you, and we'll see if we can't make our way a bit closer to Yggdrasil and try again. We'll not give yous any bother, I promise.
Rab is one of the most straightforward party members in design. He has lowest strength and a good amount of both magic stats, and boasts a strong selection of offensive and healing spells. Rab is very clearly meant to be the mixed magic user, forming a bridge between the min-max Veronica and Serena. That said, he has enough unique traits to hold his own, mostly in his spell selection. He's the sole user of the dark magic spells of Zam and its upgrades, which are single damage spells with a mean crit chance, a side grade to Frizz. And like in Octagonia, he has a good amount of stats inflictors and removers, giving him a unique support role. He's not the best at either side of magic, but he's certainly no slouch either, and you won't regret fielding him alongside some physical units. His skill tree, aside from his weapons, is a section called Enlightenment, which is filled with a couple things that may as well just be spells. It's not a bad tree though, not at all, but compared to his weapons, it's kinda unnotable. And on that note, Rab's weapon selection is utterly bonkers. Like the sisters, he gets a wand, heavy wands in this case, same as Veronica, alongside a physical weapon, that being claws. The weird part is, unlike the twins, running claws on Rab isn't actually that bad. I decided to do it in this playthrough. First off, his strength isn't all too bad. It's obviously not as good as his magic stats, but he can really easily get the boost he needs from the claw skill tree. Second off, claws are some of the best weapons in the game, since they always hit twice and have stupidly high crit rates. And due to how crits in this game are calculated, even someone with low strength can do hefty damage by rolling right. Thirdly, since Rab's already sort of a generalist, making him a decent physical attacker just turns him into a weird all-arounder, akin to Sylvando or Luminary. You really don't need 3 of these guys, but it doesn't hurt. And finally, and most importantly, he just looks really funny with claws. Seriously, watching somebody built like this do a full backflip is just hilarious. Like Jade, I want to touch on Rab's character, because I haven't gotten a chance to do so yet. Rab is simply oozing with personality. He's a jolly Scottish old guy, and the writing and voice acting do a great job portraying this. Every line he says, from his big speeches to his one-liners in battle, is an utter joy to listen to. Compared to the rest of the cast, he's a lot more upfront with his personality, and you can tell he's like from just a few lines, a trait he shares with Sylvando and Veronica, and moments like the previous scene just help to show off how funny he can be. That said, I really don't like Rab. I know it's some crazy whiplash, but let me explain. Rab is really good in short bursts, for reasons I just explained. When he's a side character, or just there to say a few funny lines, he's amazing. When he's the focus of a scene, he becomes the most double-sided character in the game, depending on the full context for the scene. As an old-timer, he's been around the world, met a lot of people, and experienced many of the wonders of Erdrea. When a scene is directly about Rab and his past, it's phenomenal. We saw this in Dundrasil, and it'll become much more prominent in Act 2. But when it's not about Rab personally, Rab's main role in the group is to exposit, and the man does his job well. He'll talk about Morgan, Erdrea's history, the relation of a town. Hell, every time you start the game from a save, he'll be waiting on the loading screen to remind you what happened, even before he joins the party. Most of the time, though, it's totally unnecessary. We'll enter a town, and Rab will be like, Sniflheim. You know, laddie, this place is pretty cold, but the girls here are anything but ho-ho. As there's a massive snowstorm swirling around us, like we couldn't figure that out. He just has this problem of stating things that really don't need to be stated, which gets further exemplified when he eventually starts to cut off the player's own thinking to spell things out. Like, back in Phnom Nomh, there's that scholar who mentioned now it was ruined by a supernatural force, and the player can connect the dots to realize that was a nation Morgan destroyed. But wait! Here comes Rab to explain the whole thing for you because subtlety is a crime. This is a gripe I have with the game as a whole, but Rab is definitely the biggest offender. This puts Rab in this bizarro state as a character, where he's really, really good sometimes and utterly unbearable at others. I don't want to say dislike him because of amazing scenes like Dundrasil, but I also can't say I wholly like him because of his constant expositing. I think I'm generally more positive towards him, and that's probably solely due to his voice acting. Alex Norton's performance is probably my favorite in the game. He kills it. He sells all the emotions Rab goes through, whilst keeping his funny Scottish accent the whole time.
I'm not putting this young lassie's fate in the hands of a ballyhoo like you and your box of balls.
Rab's a complicated character, that's for sure, and it seems that the general community isn't too keen on him either. After the game's release, there was a poll hosted by Famitsu asking people questions on the game, with the most notable one being who people's favorite character was. Rab ended up dead last, with about 150 votes out of 4,200 participants. Like, you gotta do something pretty wrong to end up below the silent protagonist of all characters. Sylvando won, in case you're wondering. Another question on the poll was asking about what people's favorite scene in the game was, and there were some pretty great responses. Erik and Hero jumping from the cliff, the opening cutscene, Dundrasil, the return to Cobblestone, all these fantastic, emotionally impactful scenes. And then there's this guy from the Netherlands who simply says, the scene with Rab where he dropped his book was pretty funny. God damn, I love this game. The next destination for the party is none other than the sisters' homeland of Arboria, which is due east of Sniflheim. Man, traveling through this area at night makes it feel a lot more mystical. I really love the look of even the simple environments in this game. On the road, you'll pass by this giant frozen lake with a huge dragon concealed in ice. There's a book in the Great Library documenting a huge dragon that got sealed beneath the ice after causing too much disaster to be left roaming about. Let's hope it stays in there. There's another good use of the Eggbot Mountain on the path to Arboria, being used to climb up a spirally cliff face. Compared to every other time it's been used, this one feels a lot more made for it, having a ton more space to just jump around. Also, you remember how using Yggdrasil to track progress was one of my favorite parts of the game? Well, it really feels like we're coming to a close now, as we can finally see the World Tree in all of its glory. It's beautiful. Arboria is a holy town, being entirely dedicated to watching, protecting, and worshipping Yggdrasil. The town has its own theme song, filled with horns getting you pumped for the final stretch. The party walks in on the town thanking the World Tree for the new child, only to be surprised by Serena and Veronica returning, with Veronica about half the height she left. They completed their mission of finding the Luminary, who the village also kinda worships since he is Yggdrasil's chosen. The Holy Father will grant us access to the First Forest, after a bit of talk in the cathedral, but then we're free to explore. First off, the party talk in this area is great. Sylvando's complaining about how boring the town is, Jade's actually being a really good character, and Erik, much like myself, is just hyped to get to the World Tree and get the best view in Erdrea. Arboria is the most interesting town to explore though. None of the residents are that exciting to talk to, as most of them are too focused on gawking at the Luminary, and the town is so small they condense the weapon, armor, and item shop into one thing. That's not to say there's nothing of interest though. There's a door leading to a mountaintop that's completely inaccessible at present, but you'd better be looking forward to a mountaintop view this close to the Tree of Life. There's also this small area to the north called the Grove of Repose. There's no music playing, and the only other person there is a sickly child with a side quest. It's ominous. Compared to the triumphant and bustling city connected to it, the Grove feels wrong. But aside from the side quest, there's nothing to actually do here, which is a recurring theme in the town. It's kind of just a pit stop for now. You pop in, buy some items, learn some lore, and go on your merry way. Because of this, I'm not going to be throwing it on the tier list, but instead grouping with the final steps to Yggdrasil. The cathedral, however, is an interesting place. It documents the story of the original Luminary in 4 paintings. Basically, there was a dark being seeking the heart of Yggdrasil for evil, so the World Tree chose the most worthy of men, Erdwin, to fight for all mankind and vanquish evil with his friends. Joining him was Serenica, a mighty sage, and 2 other guys who don't get mentioned. Just as 11 is Erdwin reincarnated, Veronica and Serena are 2 halves of Serenica. Do you think their parents knew that and named him like that, or was it just the greatest coincidence of all time? After defeating the great evil, Erdwin is sent to the heavens, where he watches over Erdrea to this day from his star. Erdwin's birth also marked the beginning of the Age of Heroes that every tale from long ago seems to take place in. After we get the lore dump, the Holy Father wishes us good luck, and opens the door onward to the First Forest. Hey, did you know they can't rotate the camera up in photo mode? Do you have any idea how much I hate that? Our goal is in sight, closer than ever, but there's a bit of a meandering trail before the final dungeon. During this time, I want to look at Act 1 as a whole, to see what role it serves in the story. In one word, Act 1 is about world. Not lore like world building, but the present day world of Erdrea. It starts in Cobblestone, and watches you run back and forth across the continent for a reason, getting used to the world, tone, and characters of the game. It takes you from town to town on a pretty linear path, and gives you a reason to remember all of them, while keeping a relatively upbeat and cheery mood. There's definitely sometimes where it gets darker or sadder, but for the most part, it sets the tone really well for the following acts to, well, follow up on. As anything with the characters, Act 1 is meant to give you a taste of them all. You'll get a scene or 2 about them, a few really memorable moments, but every character, except for Erik, is more or less the same from when you first met them. Similar thing with the lore too. You get a basic understanding of the story of Erdwin, the fall of Dundrasil, and the situation of Heliodor, without learning the nitty gritty of any of it. All of these combine to make Act 1's role clear. It establishes the world of Dragon Quest XI, and eases the player into all the elements of it without overwhelming them in any one. It's precisely what you would expect from a first act. It just takes 40 hours and has so many great moments in it because of how grand this game is. Act 1 isn't my favorite though. Despite all the praise I've been hanging out through this entire video, I think the latter ones surpass it, but that's for another time. Let's finish this up, shall we? The first forest is an area directly beneath Yggdrasil, and serves as the 8th and final dungeon in Act 1, and I am pleased to say that this area is as masterfully designed as it is named. It's a pretty small dungeon, and consists of a couple of switchbacks gradually going up to the altar. First off, you can see the altar from the moment you enter the dungeon, which is awesome. It's got a pretty simple layout, but a really wide path, making it easy to avoid the plentiful encounters, should you please. There are a ton of side routes and detours for the treasure, most of which have a really quick way back to the main path, so it never feels like you're wasting too much time. It's also at this point, right at the tail end of Act 1, that Zap started to fall off. Yeah, the spell you get in the demo portion of the game is finally starting to waver a bit. I cannot get over how stupidly good the spell is, dude. Now, from an aesthetic perspective, this is probably my favorite dungeon in Act 1. Of the 8 dungeons, only 2 of them are naturally made, and this is the only one that would have basically anything in the way of greenery. But man, does the dungeon run with the theme. First off, it's just gorgeous. All the colors of nature are lush and vibrant, making it a really nice change of pace from all the toned down colors and grays that come to mind when you think dungeon. But the theme goes beyond the basic design. Every aspect of the dungeon is imagined as some kind of plant or fungus. Vines for ropes, mushrooms for stairs, fallen logs for bridges, etc. Hell, even the enemies fit in this theme. All of them are natural creatures, and most of them even fit with the woody color scheme of the area. Stumps, succubats, these coral guys, dragons, metal slimes, ooh, and most interestingly, pine needlers. These are a recolor of one of the enemies you encountered all the way back in the Cobblestone tour. It's a really great way to connect the two ends of the act with a simple detail like that. The area is mostly covered in shadows, and immediately plunges you into them as soon as you enter the dungeon. You are directly beneath Yggdrasil, and is blocking out the sun, sort of symbolizing how this dungeon is the last thing blocking your progress, but I may be looking a bit too deep. Either way, you'll get snippets of the sun, up until you get to the very top of the hill, just shy of the altar. The sun finally takes over the sky, and the shots you get up here are breathtaking. Seriously, I cannot get over just how great this dungeon, and this game as a whole, looks. It's fantastic. At the top of the dungeon, you don't find a boss waiting for you, but rather a cutscene. Rab's old bones are killing him, so the party makes rest at the base of the hill. Veronica's feeling nervous about the trek tomorrow, actually being able to reach the world tree, which is just out of touch, gently gazing down upon the party. She asks Serena to play a song, which she does. The song is the harp rendition of the track they played during the Dundrasil ceremony, and it's just as touching as always. The song is played quite often throughout the game actually, but only the most important moments, so it always feels special. The party takes their time to talk about the Tree of Life itself, how each leaf represents a person, and when they die, their soul returns to her, only to bloom again in new life. Veronica pulls out a flute, but not to play it. The flute was once Serenica's, and got handed down through the ages, eventually falling into Veronica's hands. Even though she can't play it, she knows there must be something special about it, yet to be discovered. And with that, the party heads to sleep. Or try to. Serena wakes up Veronica with a question.
We were born at the same time, so our leaves bloomed at the same time, didn't they? Do you think they'll fall at the same time too?
I don't know. You've always been a bit slow, to be honest.
And I've gotta be honest here. As much as I love this game and everything in it, subtlety is not one of its strong suits. Heading upwards, Yggdrasil's altar is waiting at the top, but remember to always check for mini-mells, even when the fate of the world is at stake. The party hop up onto the altar and bring out the orbs. They start glowing and flying around, landing on the 6 pedestals. Unlike Smash Bros, the platform doesn't begin flying around the world, sadly. Instead, it creates a long, twisting path leading up to the world tree. If Rab was having trouble with the forest, I can't imagine what this would do to the old guy. The bridge is just a fade to black, seeing a ton of walking with not much else. Now, the game has spent the last 35 hours building up to this point. After walking around the world to get the rainbow, and then sailing around the world to get the 6 orbs, clearing out dungeon after dungeon and boss after boss, everything has been leading up to Yggdrasil itself. And how is it? It is magical. I'm really lost for words. The music, the colors, the creatures, the flora, the water, the sounds, everything here is just perfect. Everything feels slightly alien but so familiar, and most importantly, so homely, like we're meant to be here. It's beautiful. Just being here makes me tear up a bit. As much as I would truly love to stop and admire the scene forever and ever, the heart of the world is waiting, and going inside, there really is a heart. A translucent orb wrapped in vines containing the Sword of Light, Dragon Quest's most iconic item, and the sword meant to dispel the darkness. As Sylvando aptly demonstrates, only Yggdrasil's chosen can claim the blade. 11 steps forth to receive the power from the World Tree. The vines slide away as he reaches for the blade, ready to bestow this sacred power unto the luminary. But dark forces never rest. Jasper has been trailing the party, presumably since Sniflheim, and he's much stronger than when we encountered him back in Gondolia. He managed to acquire a 7th orb, one of a menacing purple hue, and is more than willing to demonstrate its powers, and has no intent on letting the luminary leave alive. We're thrown into a boss fight, but it's less of a fight and more of a massacre. Jasper is completely intangible, with every attack entirely missing thanks to his new power. He's having no trouble though. He spends a while toying with the party and laughing at their failure, until he unleashes the orb's power, knocking everyone to a single hit point. Jasper walks to the heart of Yggdrasil, and all hope seems lost, when out of nowhere, Sir Hendrik shows up with King Carnelian in tow. These two are following the guy following the party, and Hendrik has come to prove Jasper a traitor to Heliodor and Erdrea as a whole, and punish him by any means necessary. And then things really go downhill. Carnelian floors Hendrik effortlessly and walks forward. As he does, great dark powers leave him, having no more need for a vessel. There aren't many options on who this pointy-haired dark mage could be. Morrigan steps over to Hero, and the game switches to a fully rendered cutscene. Morrigan reaches straight into 11 and rips out the essence of Luminary, removing his birthmark in the process. With his new power, Morrigan releases the vines around Yggdrasil's heart and steals the very weapon meant to slay him. With its role complete, he shatters the essence of the Luminary, instantly twisting and corrupting the Sword of Light, morphing it into an amalgamation of stones and spikes, with a lone eyeball flailing around. He uses the new blade to cut directly into the heart of Yggdrasil, which starts bleeding out all of its energy, only for Morrigan to be there to absorb it. The tree withers in an instant, and in one last act of power, Morrigan unleashes his full force, sending the World Tree falling to the ground, decimating the surrounding landscape, and causing unknowable damage throughout the continent. And with the fall of Yggdrasil, the source of all life in Erdrea, Act 1 of Dragon Quest XI concludes, and so is this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.